Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Dreamland Encounters. Here on this channel I share real-life encounters with beings from beyond the skies to help you unwind and drift off to sleep. Before we dive in, I would love to hear from you. Leave a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from. Now find a comfortable spot, relax, and let's begin. The storm was brewing in Springfield, one of those thick July evenings where humidity clings to your skin and the sky darkens to a bruised purple. I was sitting on my back porch, beer in hand, watching the clouds roll over each other like dark waves. Thunder rattled the window frames, and I'd always found something oddly calming about these moments. But that night felt different from the start. Lightning began its usual dance, jagged bolts slicing through darkness, followed by low rumbles. As I leaned back in my old plastic chair, one particular lightning strike caught my eye. This wasn't like the others. It was thinner, sharper, almost like someone had drawn a precise white line from cloud to horizon. And it didn't fade. It just hung there. I blinked, thinking my eyes were playing tricks. Yet the line remained, a perfect vertical white streak against the cloud cover. No flickering, no branching, just solid and strange. Initially, I figured it might be some meteorological phenomenon with a complicated scientific name. But then the line moved. A slight bend, almost imperceptible, as if it had its own intention. Suddenly it shot horizontally across the sky, vanishing behind another cloud layer. Its movement was too deliberate to be natural lightning. Rain started spitting against the porch roof, and thunder rolled closer. With each sky flash, I expected the line to reappear somewhere else. It didn't. Instead, something else caught my attention. Small, irregular flashes at odd angles. They were faint, almost like metallic reflections moving erratically above. Curious and slightly unnerved, I went inside to grab my binoculars, wondering what exactly I was witnessing in this increasingly bizarre storm. I was watching the storm from the doorway, careful not to let the rain soak me. My phone was in hand, ready to capture the scene, but as I raised the camera, the rain thickened into a wall, blocking any clear view. Even alone, I felt that unmistakable sensation of being watched. The feeling was heavy, almost physical, like the air itself had weight. I retreated inside. The storm intensified, wind battering the house. Settling by the window, I watched the rain sheets, anticipating something's return. I tried focusing on the regular lightning and thunder, but then I saw it again. Not the line from before, but a shape moving through the clouds. At first, just a faint silhouette, darker than the surrounding sky, gliding horizontally. Completely silent, no lightning branching, just moving. I realized no thunder had accompanied it. Strange in such a loud storm. Moving against the cloud's direction, it vanished behind the heavy storm cover. I rubbed my eyes, attempting to dismiss it as imagination. Pacing the living room, the storm sounded normal again. Yet I kept glancing outside, half expecting the line or silhouette to reappear. The air carried that wet, metallic smell preceding lightning strikes, but no strike came, just a lingering tension, as if the storm were restraining something. Trying to normalize, I poured another beer, but something felt off. Each time I turned to the window, odd details caught my attention. A white flash in the cloud's corner, not lightning, a perfectly straight streak pausing midair, shadows where none should exist. I rationalized it as storm-induced nerves, but nothing explained the unsettling feeling of being watched, of something responding to my gaze. Finally, I decided to go outside for a better view. Rain soaked my shirt and the porch within seconds. Craning my neck toward the sky's darkest region, I waited. Suddenly, the air changed. Not temperature, just texture, thicker. And then I noticed a new lightning pattern, subtle but distinct. The storm was unlike anything I'd ever witnessed. Lightning crackled with an unnatural precision, quick flashes appearing in spots that felt deliberate. A sudden thunderburst made me jump back, and that's when I saw it, a thin white line slicing vertically through the black clouds. I couldn't look away. Something about its movement was wrong. The line bent slightly, tracing a familiar curve, then zipped horizontally across the sky faster than anything I could comprehend. No accompanying thunder, no additional flash, just gone in an instant. My arms tingled, hairs standing on end. I rushed inside, locked the door, and tried to steady my nerves on the couch. Gradually the storm returned to normal, lightning rolling and branching as it should. Outside looked ordinary now. Just rain, clouds, and streetlights glowing through the downpour. 15 minutes had passed, though it felt like hours. Who could I tell? The story sounded crazy even to me. A bent lightning bolt moving horizontally? my friends would laugh. And yet, the strange weight in the air, the storm's unsettling aliveness, lingered long after the rain stopped. By bedtime, stars peeked through clearing skies. One final glance outside revealed a faint streak, a thin white line moving too precisely, too quickly to be natural. Then it vanished. Now, every storm that passes through Springfield feels different. I watch the clouds, track the lightning's patterns, half expecting that mysterious line to reappear. Sometimes I catch a glimpse, just for a moment, a slice through the sky that doesn't belong. I've shared the story casually over beers, hearing dismissive chuckles. Maybe I imagined it, but I know what I saw. Something extraordinary happened that night, something I can't explain. Back then, I was running the 1145 freight out of Fargo on a cold January evening. Frost crusted the engine's controls, my breath turning to smoke instantly. The cab was quiet, the train mostly empty, just another routine night that became anything but routine. I still can't explain it, but I know it happened. The night was quiet, the snow falling lightly and making the world around me hushed. My train rolled along, the tracks glistening under the dim headlamp. I'd been watching the dark horizon when something caught my attention. A shape hung motionless above the tracks, maybe a mile ahead. At first, I thought it might be a maintenance crane or drone, but it wasn't moving, had no lights, and wasn't connected to anything. Large and dark, it just hung there silently. I rubbed my eyes, hoping to clear my vision, but it remained. Trying to gauge its size was impossible in the darkness and falling snow. It felt massive, that unsettling feeling when something impossibly large appears where it shouldn't be. I grabbed the radio, expecting someone to respond, but only static answered. I slowed the train, my hands gripping the throttle tightly. As we approached within half a mile, the shape began to dissolve, seeming to melt into the air. I blinked, and suddenly it was gone. No sound, no rush of air, no wind shift, just empty sky. Driving forward, I tried to make sense of what I'd seen. In 20 years as a conductor, I'd witnessed plenty of strange things. Fallen trees, wildlife, unusual weather, but nothing like this. When we reached the exact spot, something else struck me. The metal rails were unnaturally warm. Even through my gloves, I could feel intense heat radiating from the metal. The surrounding air was freezing, barely 20 degrees, yet the rails felt like they'd been left under a forge. I ran my hand along the track, discovering the heat extended about 20 feet in each direction before dropping off. There was no explanation. No engine had passed through in hours, and rails shouldn't be this hot. Returning to the cab, I kept glancing outside. The snow fell evenly, and the tracks looked perfectly normal under the street lamp. But I couldn't shake the sensation of being watched, not by an animal, but something else entirely. I was driving the train, and something felt off. My breath was coming fast, and each time I looked up through the windshield, I half expected to see a dark shape lurking nearby. Nothing appeared. Then, passing a small siding with some old cars stored, I caught a glimpse of movement like someone standing on top of a car, but it didn't make sense. The snow obscured my vision, and when I looked directly, the area was empty as always. I tried convincing myself it was just a trick of the snow, maybe a reflection from my cab lights. By the time I reached the next signal, my grip on the wheel had tightened. Everything seemed normal. Tracks clear, switches aligned, signals blinking, yet my stomach kept twisting. An almost physical memory lingered, the warmth in the rails where something had been. At the next yard, I called in a cautious report. "Something unusual on the tracks," I said, careful not to sound crazy. When the dispatcher asked about a vehicle or debris, I hesitated. "No, nothing physical, just strange heat and something I can't explain." He simply told me to log it. That night, I was unsettled. I tried finding rational explanations. A maintenance crew, an unknown weather phenomenon, a weird snow reflection. Nothing fit. The rail warmth made no sense. Steel doesn't heat itself in sub-zero temperatures without a source. The next day, I returned with an infrared thermometer. Nothing. The rails were cold metal, exactly what you'd expect in January. Whatever had been there had vanished completely. During a coffee break, I mentioned it to co-workers. They responded with nervous laughter. Maybe you're tired. Old man eyes playing tricks. I didn't argue. They hadn't seen what I saw, but I could still picture it hovering over the tracks, unmoving. I was driving through the Mojave late one night where the desert feels endless and stars so bright they make you forget the asphalt beneath your tires. The journey from Barstow toward my friend's place near Baker was quiet with the day's heat fading but still leaving a dry, heavy air that scratched at my throat. About 50 miles outside of Barstow, something caught my eye, a shimmer right over the middle of the road, like one of those heat mirages you see. My car radio was dead, which didn't bother me. I liked the quiet, but occasional wind gusts would whip across the flatland and rattle my mirrors, making me glance in the rear view as if expecting something behind me. Later, when I drove that same route again, I kept my eyes fixed on the horizon. Everything looked normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling of something invisible heating up the rails. The memory made me tense every time I passed that stretch. I tried to get a clear look from the cab camera, but it didn't record anything unusual. Even the signal camera at the siding showed nothing, as if whatever I'd seen existed for just seconds, leaving only a trace of warmth before vanishing completely. Work soon consumed my thoughts, and I thought about it less. But occasionally, I'd catch myself staring out the window at night, checking the tracks, my stomach tightening. That stretch of steel still feels different to me. During inspections, when I run my hand along the rails, I still remember that warmth, though it's long gone. I've been back on that route dozens of times since. I've seen deer, snowdrifts, ice patches, even another freight blocking a siding, but never anything like that shape again. I don't tell people, because I can't explain it and don't want to sound crazy. But every time I pass that spot at night, my eyes flick up to the horizon first, and I feel the same quiet unease. I don't know what it was or why it was there. I don't know why the rails warmed under it. All I know is that it happened. And for a moment, the world was a little less predictable. That quiet stretch of track over frozen ground carried something I couldn't name silent, and then disappearing like it had never been there. The desert highway stretched out before me, silent and dark. What caught my eye wasn't something normal. A strange shimmer hovered about 15 feet above the road, distorting the air like a heat haze, but completely wrong. It wasn't solid, yet it wasn't empty space either, more like a bend in reality itself. My headlights passed right through it with no reflection. Something felt off. I slowed down, watching carefully. The shimmer seemed to respond, tilting subtly as if measuring my approach. No sound accompanied its movement, no hum, no wind, just absolute silence heavier than the desert night. I reached for my phone on the passenger seat, wanting to capture this bizarre moment. As soon as I unlocked the screen, it went black. When it finally came back to life, the battery had mysteriously dropped from 78% to 9%. The timing felt impossible, too precise to be a coincidence. Suddenly, the shimmer lifted like an invisible curtain, rising straight up. Then, without warning, it shot skyward, faster than anything I'd ever seen. No blur, no sound, just instantaneous disappearance into the black night. My heart raced as I tried to process what I'd just witnessed. When I looked back, the road was completely normal. No trace remained. My phone showed 9% battery, no signal, nothing. I tried to rationalize it. Heat, stress, imagination playing tricks. But something fundamental had shifted. About 10 miles later, movement caught my eye. Small shadows darted along the roadside, hinting that my strange encounter was far from over. The desert road stretched out before me, dark and empty. Something caught my eye moving back and forth among the moss bushes. The shapes weren't rabbits or coyotes. They were too large, too fast, too coordinated. They seemed to almost float above the ground, like the desert floor was bending around them. Each time I tried to get a clear look, they would vanish into the darkness. My curiosity grew as I slowed down, craning my neck. Later, my headlights revealed another shimmer in the distance, hovering above a dry wash. This one was different, smaller, more like a heat column than a full distortion. My heart raced and my hands grew sweaty on the steering wheel. I didn't dare move closer. The speedometer flickered wildly, dropping from 65 to 0 before jumping back. I passed the spot quickly, not wanting to linger. For the next half hour, nothing happened. Just the long desert stretch and my headlights cutting through the darkness. My phone stayed stubbornly at 9% with no signal or GPS. The isolation felt overwhelming. I'm usually calm on drives like this, but something felt a tension built in my chest that I couldn't shake. The shimmer appeared again, right above the road this time. I was starting to recognize its pattern. Appearing, floating, then shooting away. I slowed down, keeping a mile or so back. Part of me wanted to turn around to get off this highway, but I couldn't look over. Suddenly, a car appeared behind me. Its headlights were dim, moving like it was deliberately following. I flicked my high beams, hoping it was just another driver, but there was no response. It just stayed there, a dark shape trailing me. I thought about pulling over, but something told me to keep driving. Stopping seemed like it might draw more attention. Stories of strange desert encounters flooded my mind. My rational brain kept saying, "This is insane. There's nothing here." But my gut knew something was wrong. The car behind me didn't change lanes or try to pass. It just followed at the exact same speed. I wanted to call someone, but my phone was useless. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, the car was gone. No sound, no warning. I was driving late at night, the road stretching out before me through the desert. Something felt off, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Baker was just ahead, a small cluster of lights promising some sense of normality. My pulse was racing as I slowed down entering the town. Days later, I'm still trying to make sense of what happened. The desert's nighttime silence feels heavy, like it's concealing something just beyond perception. Every explanation I've considered falls short. Heat haze? Atmospheric anomaly? None of it explains the strange details. My dying phone, those shapes moving in the bushes, a car that wasn't really there. It all started one night when I woke around 3 a.m. to an unexpected brightness filling my bedroom. This wasn't normal streetlight, but a weird, flickering glow that seemed to consume the entire room. Looking out the window, everything appeared perfectly normal. Quiet, empty, the typical suburban stillness of early morning. But there it was, an oval of light hovering 2 blocks away, completely motionless. Not like a neon sign or passing car, just suspended in midair. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was out there had been watching me, aware of my presence. Now, whenever I'm driving or staring at a dark stretch of road, I catch a faint shimmer in the distance. It hangs there, waiting. I check my phone's battery life compulsively. I haven't driven that particular road alone since that night. I know how it sounds. I don't share this story often. The movement of that distortion, the way it seemed unbound by normal physics, it defies explanation. Sometimes I try to rationalize it, talk myself down, but deep down, I know something unexplainable happened, and I'll likely never understand what. I was wide awake, staring out the window when something caught my eye. It was just past 3 a.m., and the streetlight was behaving strangely. The glow started shrinking, first slowly, then rapidly. Within seconds, it collapsed into a tiny pinpoint and vanished completely. Darkness returned instantly. Houses were pitch black, the night eerily silent. Sleep was impossible after that. I dressed quickly and stepped outside, greeted by the sharp morning chill that jolts you more effectively than any alarm. The sky looked completely ordinary, just stars and occasional blinking streetlights. No planes, no helicopters, nothing unusual. I walked to the neighbor's side of the street, half expecting to see someone else awake, but the block was utterly deserted. Something odd struck me as I returned home. My car's headlights were on, though I was certain I'd switched them off before bed. My hands trembled slightly while turning them off, trying to rationalize what might have happened. Had I sleepwalked? Had someone been near the car? But the doors were locked, and no signs of disturbance were visible. My phone's behavior was equally strange. Earlier it showed 92% battery, but now it was down to 27%. When I plugged it in, the charge crept up sluggishly, as if something had instantaneously drained its power. I attempted to call my brother, knowing he'd be up late gaining, but the call wouldn't connect, just a series of meaningless beeps. Sitting on the couch, I noticed a dark shape at the edge of the neighbor's yard. The street lamp's weak light barely illuminated it. Initially, I thought it might be a cat or raccoon, but it remained unnaturally still. When I moved to get a better view, it seemed to sense my attention and smoothly slipped behind the hedge, vanishing completely. I tried to convince myself I was imagining things, but something fundamental felt off. The night felt strange from the start. My cat Oliver wasn't his usual self, pacing back and forth on the bed instead of sleeping soundly. His ears were forward, tail twitching, and he kept staring out the window. Every time I glanced away, I felt like something was watching from just beyond the yard. I retreated inside, closing all the blinds and trying to calm down. Sitting on the couch, I attempted to focus on normal sounds, the refrigerator's steady hum, distant cars passing by. Then my phone buzzed unexpectedly. No notifications, just a random buzz. When I checked, the battery had dropped from 28% to 9% in what seemed like minutes. It didn't make sense. I powered off the phone and left it on the counter, deciding to deal with it later. Sleep came fitfully, with every small noise making me alert. The air conditioner's click, wind against the siding, even Oliver's soft footsteps on the carpet, everything felt heightened and unnatural. Morning brought pale sunlight and a return to normalcy. The street looked typical, with no signs of anything out of the ordinary. My phone, now plugged in, charged normally, and reached 100% without any issues. The yard was quiet, the neighborhood slowly awakening. I tried rationalizing the experience. Maybe sleep deprivation, city lights, or a low-flying plane, but nothing explained it completely. How could a light hover motionless, then shrink and vanish? Why would my phone drain so rapidly? I spent the day scanning the street and sky, searching for answers. My neighbor, an early morning dog walker, hadn't noticed anything unusual. She laughed when I mentioned my experience, suggesting I might have been dreaming. That night, I double-checked all locks and closed the blinds. Oliver remained unusually alert, staying close to me. Around 2:45 a.m., the street lamp across from my house flickered once. Just once. I watched for hours, but nothing more happened. Yet the memory of that perfectly still light, hanging in space before contracting, continues to haunt me. I can't explain what occurred that night, but the unexplained phone battery drain unsettles me most of all. Something felt off, something I couldn't quite understand. I haven't seen the light since. Not in weeks, not in months. But some nights when it's dark and quiet, I still glance toward the edge of the neighborhood, almost expecting to see that faint shimmer, waiting perfectly still, watching. It started on my little boat, the Minnow, a 24T center console off the northern coast of Maine. I usually didn't head out past 10 o'clock, but that night I had fish to clean, and the moon was almost full. The water was calm, almost syrupy in the dead of night, with a sharp cold that sank into my bones no matter how many layers I wore. I had just gotten the lines in and was rinsing the deck when it happened. At first I thought it was a lighthouse or another boat, but nothing showed on the radar. Then a beam of white light, really bright, cut across the water. It came from above the clouds like a searchlight, but something was off. Too steady, too precise. Not swinging, not blinking, just sliding across the waves as if someone were sweeping them with a ruler. I froze. Since that night, I've been dealing with a kind of interference. But interference from what? I don't know. I stopped checking outside at night, tried to let it go, but sometimes when I'm falling asleep, I swear I see a faint shimmer in the corner of my vision. Not moving, not making noise, just there at the edge of the neighborhood. I know if I turn my head, nothing will be there. I've considered setting up cameras, but part of me doesn't want proof. I want to forget. Yet another part keeps thinking, what if it happens again? What if next time it's not just light and battery drains? I still live here. Nothing else has happened. At least, nothing obvious. I tried to sleep normally, though I wake at odd times, heart racing. And Oliver, my dog, he's still skittish at night, staring out windows, ears forward, tail twitching like he remembers something I can't see. I don't know what I saw that night. I don't know if anyone else has, but I keep remembering that moment, the oval, still and bright, shrinking until it vanished. It doesn't feel like something from this world. The silence that followed, that total quiet, made everything else seem wrong. My friends would laugh it off, call me paranoid, or say I was half asleep. But I know what I saw. I know what my phone did. And I know Oliver knew something too. The cold was bone deep, the beam casting an otherworldly light that seemed to drain warmth from everything it touched. My fingers fumbled with the controls, teeth chattering, despite my gloves. The water beneath looked bleached, stripped of color, reflecting nothing like moonlight. Something was wrong. The light moved differently, not steady, but sliding in a searching pattern. Was it looking for me? Then, abruptly, darkness swallowed everything. Thick and wet, like a heavy blanket pulled over the ocean, silence pressed against me. My mind raced, trying to rationalize. A helicopter? A weather drone? But there was no sound, no hum, no motor, just blackness and water that felt colder than before. I started heading back to the marina, keeping the engine steady. The waves lapped normally, but something felt off, hollow. I talked to myself, even cursed the darkness, hoping to break the tension. That's when I noticed the fog. Not dense, but a thin veil rising from the water. It moved unnaturally, not swirling, not drifting, but shifting smoothly, as if following an unseen pattern. My stomach churned. A tiny flick, like someone had tapped it. Once, twice, 3 times. It never left north, but something made it hesitate. This far out, with no metal overhead except my boat, that shouldn't happen. I tried the radio. VHF static was my only response, but the static wasn't just static anymore. It sounded like breathing a low, even hiss of inhaling and exhaling, as if someone stood right behind the speaker. My heart raced as I slammed the radio down, catching a glimpse of the clouds. They were thick and low, and then I noticed a faint glow hidden behind them, barely visible like a distant lantern in a foggy window. It wasn't moving like any aircraft or marker, just hovering steadily. Then, as quickly as it appeared, it vanished. No gradual fade, no blinking, just gone. I tried to dismiss it, reasoning that the cold, the darkness, and my exhaustion were playing tricks on my mind. Yet the feeling persisted, as if something was watching from above, waiting for a mistake, observing my every move. Small sounds became magnified, waves slapping against the hull, a distant gull's cry, the motor's vibration. The entire journey back, I remained on high alert. Midway through, something strange happened. The water beneath the boat felt different, heavier, like moving through distinct pockets of atmosphere. It wasn't any current I recognized. The boat remained stable, but my gut told me something was fundamentally wrong. I slowed down, floating momentarily, and noticed an unnatural silence. Even the engine's hum seemed off. The ocean around me had lost its depth, feeling hollow and muted. When the marina's lights finally came into view, it was like entering a completely different reality. Warm, normal, human. I tried calling the harbor master to report my arrival, but found myself unable to articulate what I'd experienced. Who would believe a searching light cutting across the water? Who would understand the fog's seemingly intentional movement, the compass's erratic behavior, the radio's eerie hissing that sounded like breathing? After tying up the boat, I sat in the cabin staring out at the water. Everything looked peaceful and undisturbed. Yet an unsettling sensation lingered. The area of ocean I'd traversed felt fundamentally altered, as if touched by an invisible presence. I went home, attempted to warm up and eat, and tried sleeping. But sleep eluded me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that white light sliding across black water with an unnatural, precise searching motion that no human could replicate. The next morning, I inspected the boat thoroughly. Nothing seemed damaged or out of place. The waterline appeared completely normal. No evidence remained of my extraordinary experience. The night was perfectly still over Cedar Hill. No city glow, no haze, just a black sky studded with more stars than seemed possible. I was on the back deck, wrapped in a blanket, nursing a cheap thermos of coffee after a long day. The neighborhood was silent. No distant traffic, no barking dogs, not even the hum of an air conditioner. For about 20 minutes, I'd been leaning back in my chair, staring upward. That's when I noticed something odd about one particular point of light. Months later, I still can't shake the memory. It haunts me in quiet moments when I wake suddenly in the night, imagining the beam sliding across my backyard, searching, precise, silent. I've tried to rationalize it. A strange weather event, an unidentified aircraft, something explainable, but nothing fits perfectly. Nothing accounts for the metallic coldness in the air, the way the water looked drained of color, the radio's strange behavior. A few nights after that initial sighting, I took the boat out, trying to retrace my route. But there was nothing. No light. No fog. Just black, indifferent water under the moon. Yet the memory pressed down on me, heavy and unignorable. I haven't been out on the water past 10 o'clock since. My boat sits tied at the marina, quiet. I still take day trips staying within familiar boundaries. But near dusk, when I'm alone on the water, that weight returns. I've considered telling someone, the Coast Guard, scientists, even friends. But who would believe me? Not the way I remember it. The light was real. The cold was real. The silence was real. What haunts me most is the possibility that something could exist above the clouds, moving with purpose, unseen, and then simply stop. Now flashes appear when I blink. A faint hissing echoes in quiet rooms. Sometimes I catch myself staring at the sky, wondering if something is watching back. I was sipping coffee, my gaze drifting between the sky and my mug. One star caught my attention, not the brightest, but sharper, clearer somehow, as if it were closer than the others. Suddenly, it blinked. 3 distinct, precise flashes, exactly like a signal light. I initially thought it might be a plane catching moonlight, but there was no movement, no streak across the sky, just those 3 quick flashes. Then stillness. Something made me sit up, fully awake now. Seconds passed. Then, from almost the opposite side of the sky, near the tree line, another point of light mirrored the exact same pattern, 3 identical blinks. I stared, transfixed, watching the points of light. They didn't repeat their signal. Instead, they began to fade, not rapidly, not like clouds passing, but a slow, deliberate dimming until they vanished completely, leaving only empty black sky. Without realizing it, I'd stood up. My chair scraped against the deck boards. I scanned the sky, searching satellites, I thought initially. But I know how satellites move, and these hadn't moved at all. They were fixed points that simply disappeared. An unsettling sensation crept over me. Not paranoia, but a distinct feeling that this wasn't random. The timing was too precise, the synchronization too perfect to be coincidence. The night around me had changed. The crickets that had been chirping earlier were now silent. No leaf rustled. A thick, strange quietness pressed in. My ears began to ring that peculiar sound that follows sudden silence. For several minutes, I listened intently. Then, from overhead, a faint, high-pitched tone drifted through the air, definitely not from the house. Night fell, and I was sitting outside with my coffee when a strange sound caught my attention. It wasn't electrical, just a thin, constant tone like a finger running along a wine-glass rim. After about 30 seconds, it cut off abruptly. The crickets resumed their chorus immediately, as if someone had flipped a switch. Suddenly aware of the cold, I gripped my mug. The air felt sharper, like the moment before a storm arrives. I wasn't scared exactly, but I felt out of place, like I'd wandered somewhere I shouldn't be. Before going inside, I took one last look at the sky. Directly above where the first star had been, a faint, perfectly straight line of light caught my eye. It was barely visible, more like a pale thread hanging motionless. I tried to convince myself it might be a moonlit contrail, but it didn't move or spread. Just like the earlier lights, it slowly faded until nothing remained. I locked the back door, something I rarely do, and sat in the living room, my coffee growing cold. The entire experience had lasted maybe 15 minutes, but it felt like hours. For weeks afterward, I'd catch myself scanning the night sky whenever I went outside, searching for something fixed and unnervingly still. The next morning, a security app notification jolted me while making coffee. Motion detected at 2:43 a.m. I typically ignore these, usually just raccoons or the neighbor's cat, but something made me check the clip. The first 7 seconds showed nothing unusual. Grainy night vision, the porch light's faint glow, a slight ground mist. Then, in a single frame, literally a blink, the yard erupted in light, full color, bright as noon on a clear summer day. The shadows looked wrong somehow, impossibly sharp and misaligned. I didn't see those lights again, but their memory lingered, waiting just beyond my understanding. The shadows in the video frame looked wrong. The lawn chairs cast shadows pointing in 3 different directions, and the maple tree's shadows split weirdly, stretching away from points that didn't match any visible light source. Even the fence had a jagged, angular shadow cutting across the grass at an odd diagonal. Then the frame switched abruptly back to night vision, with no fade or flicker, just day, then night, then day again. I studied the timestamp closely. It didn't skip. 24308 on the bright frame, 248 on the next. No missing time. Sitting at the kitchen counter, I stared at my phone for a long time. Later that morning, around 9 o'clock, I went outside to investigate. Everything appeared normal. The chairs were exactly where they should be. The gate remained shut, and dew covered the grass. I even checked the porch light, an LED fixture that couldn't suddenly flood the yard with daylight. The shadows bothered me most. If multiple light sources were responsible, they'd have to be blindingly bright, bright enough that I would have seen them through my bedroom blinds. But I hadn't noticed or heard anything during the night. During lunch, I showed the clip to Eric, my co-worker who knows photography. He rewound and paused repeatedly, zooming in on the bright frame. Mostly silent, he suddenly frowned and asked, "What's that?" In the upper left corner, just above the fence line, was something I'd missed before. Not quite a shape, more like a light smear. It wasn't lens flare, the edges were too sharp, like a solid object reflecting light. But if it was an object, it didn't resemble anything I recognized. That night, I stayed up late in the living room with the porch light off and blinds slightly open. Around 2 a.m., I muted the TV and listened intently. The neighborhood was eerily silent. No cars, no voices, just occasional house creaks. By 2:40, the air felt different. The silence seemed to have substance. No distant highway hum, no tree rustling. Even my refrigerator sounded muted. I kept watching, waiting. Nights had become a series of strange observations for me. It began innocently enough, checking the security camera every morning, hoping to catch something unusual, but finding only mundane footage like a squirrel darting across the frame at 4 a.m. The oddities started subtly. During nighttime outdoor moments, I noticed my shadow behaving strangely. Sometimes it stretched impossibly far, almost reaching the fence when I was just a few feet from the porch steps. Another night, while taking out the trash, I caught a fleeting glimpse, a single faint strobe of light across the lawn that vanished so quickly I questioned whether I'd actually seen it. Compelled to verify, I immediately checked the live camera feed. Everything appeared normal, yet I saved a single bright frame that seemed different. Zooming in repeatedly, I noticed something peculiar. The image was sharper than usual, as if whatever illuminated the yard had enhanced the camera's resolution. The shadows bothered me most. They weren't just misaligned, they seemed to bend in unnatural ways, suggesting the ground beneath them wasn't consistently flat. I troubleshot extensively, replacing batteries, checking wiring, swapping SD cards. The system worked perfectly, but the experience lingered. Now, every night around 2:40, I find myself waiting. One night, just after 1 a.m., while half asleep on the couch with the TV running, I detected an unusual sound. It wasn't from the television or the refrigerator, but a deep, steady hum that seemed to press against the air itself. Muting the TV confirmed the sound's presence. As I walked toward the front door, the low bass note intensified. Outside, my suburban cul-de-sac was eerily silent. No cars, no movement. Yet the sound persisted, growing stronger with each step. A humming sound was drifting from outside. Standing on the porch, I saw them, a cluster of lights hovering a few hundred feet above the houses opposite me. What I thought might be one large object quickly revealed itself as something more complex. About a dozen lights moved with an eerie synchronicity, like a school of fish changing direction instantly. They weren't airplane lights, but solid white with a hint of blue, all equally bright. Their pattern constantly morphed, tightening into a ball, spreading out, then contracting again. Each shift was abrupt, like swapping film frames rather than a smooth transition. The humming seemed connected to their movement. When the lights spread, the pitch lowered slightly. When they compressed, it rose. I stepped off the porch into the driveway, never breaking my gaze. They drifted slowly westward, but not in a straight line. Every few seconds they'd jerk into a new formation, always in perfect unison. Judging their size or distance was impossible. Sometimes they appeared closer, then suddenly farther away, as if the entire group was shifting depth in the sky. I glanced at surrounding houses and trees, seeking a reference point, but nothing made sense. The night was unnaturally still, no wind, no crickets, no distant highway sounds. Only the hum remained. Grabbing my phone seemed unthinkable. Looking away, even for a moment, felt wrong. My chest tightened as I realized I'd been holding my breath. As they approached overhead, they transformed into a long, narrow line stretching across the cul-de-sac. Then they tilted, rotating on their side and climbing into the clouds. The humming intensified briefly before dropping sharply. They didn't fade. The low cloud cover swallowed them in less than 2 seconds. Sudden silence enveloped everything. I remained rooted in the driveway, stunned. I was out on the deck behind my cousin's cabin in northern Maine, trying to capture the Milky Way through long exposure photography. The location was perfect. A small lake about 20 minutes from a town so tiny it barely had a gas station, which meant almost zero light pollution. Late September, around 11 p.m., the night was cold enough that my breath hung visibly in the air. My setup was simple: a tripod, a thermos of coffee, and a folding chair. My cousin Jamie had already gone to bed, needing to be up early and not interested in spending the night staring at the sky. The silence was profound. No wind, no insects, no distant traffic sounds, just occasional loon calls breaking the stillness across the lake. About 40 minutes into my shoot, something extraordinary happened. My camera was facing southwest, with Orion low on the horizon, midway through a 20-second exposure. Suddenly, a streak of bright white light appeared in the sky. It moved diagonally downward for 2 seconds, then made a shocking instantaneous 90-degree turn to the left, shooting horizontally before vanishing. The movement was unnervingly precise. No curve, no arc, just an abrupt directional change, as if the light had struck an invisible barrier. Its speed remained constant, and the entire event occurred in complete silence. I was frozen, hands gripping my camera. Later, I waited anxiously for the morning. I checked local news outlets, hoping someone else might have reported something unusual. But there was nothing. No mentions of strange lights, no reports of low-flying aircraft, no unusual weather patterns. The incident remained unexplained. Even now, the memory lingers. Late at night, in moments of absolute quiet, I sometimes find myself muting the television, listening intently. That sound, that inexplicable light, it hasn't repeated itself, but the memory remains sharp. When I first went back inside that night, I noticed the clock read 1:24. Though I was certain I'd been outside for less than 5 minutes, it felt much longer. My hands were cold, despite the mild air when I'd first stepped out. I was out taking night photos, gripping my chair tightly as I watched the spot where something unusual had just vanished. It definitely wasn't a meteor. Meteors don't turn like that, and planes certainly don't either. I let the camera exposure finish, hoping to capture whatever streak I'd seen. I didn't check the display immediately. My eyes were still scanning the sky, watching for any repeat of what I'd witnessed. My hands felt cold, like the chill had settled deep inside them. Over the next half hour, I took 5 or 6 more shots. Nothing strange appeared. Later, inside the warm cabin with wood stove burning, I started reviewing the photos on my laptop. The shot where I expected to see the streak was completely empty. Stars looked normal. Framing was exactly as I'd set it. No blur, no streak, nothing. I considered various explanations. Maybe it was too fast to register, but a plane's blinking light would have shown up, and satellites always leave trails in long exposures. It seemed too precise to be a hallucination. The movement was too clean, too geometric. When Jamie walked by and saw me staring intently at the screen, I explained what I'd seen. He's not someone who jokes about such things. His only response was a simple weird before returning to bed. That next morning, I went onto the deck to investigate potential physical causes. Could a reflection from a boat or distant car have created the effect? But the line of sight was completely blocked by trees and shoreline. From my position, no ground-based light source could have moved like that in the sky. The day remained cloudy, preventing further investigation. But that night, I set up in the exact same spot, waiting. Around 12:30 a.m., something appeared again, different, yet somehow familiar. I was driving home late that night, taking the back road after leaving Kevin's place in the country. His house is about 40 minutes from my rental in town, and a thick fog had settled over the hills after an earlier rainstorm. I knew this route well, having driven it countless times before, but something felt different this time. The fog was so dense that my high beams only made visibility worse, so I kept them low and crawled along at maybe 30 miles an hour. The only sounds were the steady hum of tires and the occasional rattle from my dashboard when I hit rough patches. The sky wasn't as bright that night. A pale, almost grey light, like a dim star, drifted slowly across the same patch of sky. Then it stopped. Just stopped moving. I stared, thinking it might be a satellite momentarily appearing stationary, but then it darted upward in a short burst before vanishing completely. Not fading, just gone, like someone flipped a switch. I checked the camera right away. Nothing in the frame. The stars looked perfectly normal. At that point, I decided I didn't want to be outside anymore. Back home, I tried finding information online about lights over the lake, satellites, space junk, military aircraft. Nothing matched what I'd seen. The weirdest part came later that week. I was showing the photos to a friend who's into astronomy, without mentioning what I'd witnessed. He flipped through them and stopped at the first night's shot. "This one's odd," he said, pointing to a small, faint dot in the bottom corner that I'd never noticed. When he zoomed in, it wasn't round. It was a tiny, perfect triangle. I still have no idea what it was. The raw file confirms it's not a compression glitch, but that triangle shape appears only in this one shot and isn't near where I'd seen the streak. Years have passed since that night. I've returned to the cabin several times, always with my camera, but I've never seen anything similar again. Still, I find myself staring at that same patch of sky when it's clear, just in case. The moon hung dimly through gaps in the fog, a pale, hazy disk barely giving off light. My car rolled down a long, sloping stretch, flanked by trees when everything changed. One moment, the moon was visible. The next, it vanished completely, as if someone had draped a massive tarp across the sky. Darkness consumed the car instantly. This wasn't just a cloud passing, the fog remained unchanged. Something enormous blocked my view of the moon. No edges, no outline, just a massive absence of light stretching across the road in both directions. For several seconds, maybe 5 or 6, it hovered overhead, then moved on slowly. No wind, no sound. I realized I'd nearly stopped driving when I glanced at the speedometer. My hands gripped the wheel tightly. Just as suddenly, moonlight returned, dim and milky through the fog, and I continued driving as if nothing unusual had occurred. A mile later, I pulled onto a gravel turnout overlooking a small valley. I needed to catch my breath. Rolling down the window, I half expected to hear distant engines or a low hum, but silence surrounded me. Even the usual frogs and crickets were absent. Stepping out, the first thing I noticed was the fog's temperature. It wasn't cool anymore, but warm, like walking into a steamy bathroom after a shower. My jacket dampened instantly, and the air clung unnaturally to my skin. The gravel beneath my boots was slightly wet, yet the warmth seemed to emanate from everywhere around me. I stood scanning the sky, though the fog limited visibility to just a few yards. Something felt off. Then, a sound from the trees caught my attention. Not an animal, at least not one I recognized. A faint rustle mixed with an irregular clicking. It would pause, then restart, each time drawing closer. My phone's flashlight beam bounced uselessly off the grey wall of fog. I tried convincing myself it was just branches moving, but the air remained completely still. The night felt strange from the moment I started driving home. The fog was thick, dense enough to obscure everything beyond a few feet from my windshield. When I stopped at the turnout, the silence was complete. No wind, no sounds. Back in the car, I locked the door almost instinctively and sat watching my breath form small clouds in the cabin. Despite the heater running, the interior felt cold and damp, as if the outside atmosphere had seeped in. My windshield started fogging up from the inside, even with the defroster working. After about 10 minutes, I decided to continue home, driving slowly and scanning both the sky and forest edges. The moon remained visible through the fog, but each time I passed under thick tree cover, a heavy feeling settled in the air. Around 10 minutes from town, the fog thinned and the car's temperature seemed to normalize. Suddenly, sounds returned, insects chirping, frogs croaking, a distant dog barking. Whatever strange presence had been with me appeared to have vanished beyond the hills. At home, I went straight inside without unloading the car. My clothes remained damp, carrying an earthy metallic scent that lingered until I washed them the next day. Though I've driven that road many times since in various weather conditions, nothing similar has occurred. Yet I still find myself glancing up at the sky when passing that turnout, just in case. Later that night, around 12:45 a.m., I was in bed scrolling on my phone. The house was quiet, except for the fridge's soft buzzing, when I noticed another sound beneath the silence. It was so low it felt more like a chest vibration than an actual noise. Setting my phone down, I listened carefully. The sound wasn't coming from inside. When the fridge shut off, the noise became clearer, a deep, steady hum from outside. I approached the front window and peeked through the blinds. The street was empty. No cars, no people, no movement. I unlocked the door and stepped onto the porch. The air was cool and still, with a faint smell of damp asphalt. Outside, the humming intensified, not loud, but seemingly substantial, as if it had physical weight. Then I saw the lights hovering above the houses across the street, perhaps 200 or 300 feet high, in a tight cluster. I spotted them first as white or pale blue points, about the size of bright stars. There were at least a dozen, maybe more. But these weren't ordinary stars. They didn't twinkle or blink. Instead, they moved together in a way I'd never seen before, almost like a living, breathing entity. Their movement defied everything I understood about motion. Not circling, not in a straight line, but more like a school of fish shifting in perfect synchronized harmony. They would dart one direction, then freeze instantly, slide sideways, and tilt completely differently without any gradual transition. No curves, no arcs, just abrupt, impossible changes. The hum seemed connected to their movement, shifting in pitch as they did. When they spread out, it lowered. When they bunched up, it rose higher. Without thinking, I walked halfway down my driveway, completely transfixed. The lights weren't massive, but their motion made them feel uncomfortably close, as if they were challenging every physical law I knew. Absolute silence surrounded me. No rotor noise, no jet sounds, no distant highway rumble, just this strange, pulsing hum. The formation began moving toward me, but drifting doesn't capture it. They moved as if gliding on invisible rails, slowing just above the nearest row of houses. From my vantage point, I could see they weren't connected to anything, just open-ended. For about half a minute, they hovered silently, shifting and reforming. I wanted to grab my phone, but something felt wrong about looking away, as if they might vanish the moment I did. Then, collectively, they began to climb. The hum rose with them, not in volume but in pitch, becoming an almost physical pressure in my ears. They entered a low cloud bank above the streetlights and disappeared instantly. The moment the last light vanished, the humming stopped, not a fade, but an abrupt cut-off like someone flipping a switch. The silence that followed felt different, not just quiet, but empty. I stood staring at the cloud cover for what seemed like ages. Nothing returned. No lights, No sound, no movement. When I finally went inside, my clock read 108. I'd been outside only minutes, yet my hands were cold, as if I'd been standing in the night for hours. The next day, I checked local news and weather. No aircraft reports, no explanations. Late that night, everything felt different. The air was thick with the damp smell of wet leaves and soil, hanging heavy, despite the clear sky where a few stars peeked between drifting clouds. I was walking Jasper, my older golden retriever, who moves at his own leisurely pace, through the park near my apartment. The path lights seemed dimmer than usual after the earlier rain. As we crossed the street, I was half distracted by my phone when I suddenly realized how unnaturally quiet everything had become. No cars, no wind, no background traffic hum. It was like someone had muted the world. About 50 feet into the park, I saw them. 3 pure white lights arranged in a perfect, unchanging triangle. They weren't like stars or planes. These were different. Close to the park's far edge, they hung motionless at first. Then they began to move, drifting together with an eerie synchronization that defied explanation. Jasper stopped mid-walk, not barking, not growling, just frozen. His body was rigid, tail low, head slightly tilted upward as if transfixed. I tugged his leash, but he wouldn't budge. The lights started rotating, smooth as silk, turning steadily like some invisible mechanism was spinning them in perfect unison. I tried to rationalize what I was seeing. Helicopters, no sound. Balloons, impossible. The shape remained too precise, their movement too controlled. They rotated maybe a quarter turn every few seconds, maintaining their exact formation as they slowly drifted toward the trees. Even now, I can't explain it. Not drones, not planes. Just those lights, moving in a way nothing should move. Sometimes late at night, in complete silence, I catch myself listening, waiting, wondering. The lights moved incredibly fast, yet their motion was weirdly hypnotic. Not just flickering, but somehow warping the space around them. My neck started aching from staring, so I crouched down to check on Jasper, hoping to coax him forward, but he was frozen, completely tense. His ears pulled back in a way I'd never seen before. Their rotation slowed until they returned to their original position, then just stopped. For maybe 5 seconds they hung completely still, and I could feel my heartbeat thundering in my ears. Then, without warning, they winked out. No fade, no dimming, just gone. The moment the last light vanished, Jasper relaxed. He didn't run, just started walking as if nothing unusual had happened. Suddenly, neighborhood sounds rushed back. Distant cars, a barking dog, the faint buzz of streetlights. We walked home in silence, and I kept glancing upward, half expecting the lights to reappear, but the sky remained empty. Back in my apartment, I tried to rationalize what we'd seen. I checked local forums, weather reports, looked for any explanation of an event or air show. Nothing. I hadn't even thought to take a photo. My phone had stayed buried in my pocket the entire time. Jasper's reaction was the strangest part. Normally, he's curious and bold, even in weird situations. But that night, he avoided the spot where we'd first stopped. For days afterward, he'd slow down and give the park a wide berth, as if something invisible and threatening lingered there. After about a week, he seemed to return to normal. But I still haven't walked through that park at night since. The sound woke me sometime after midnight. I wasn't sure of the exact time because my phone was hidden in my pack, and I wasn't about to unzip my sleeping bag to find it. What caught my attention was a faint, irregular crunching, like footsteps on loose gravel. In the woods at night, sound carries in this strange, muffled way where distance becomes impossible to judge. I tried to convince myself it was just an animal, maybe a raccoon searching for food or a deer passing through, but something felt off. The steps were too steady, too deliberate, slow, measured, following a straight path with no pauses, no stopping to sniff or investigate. No sound, just steady crunching like boots on a surface. But there wasn't any surface. I was camped in a small clearing I'd hiked to earlier that day, about a quarter mile from the main trail. Hailstones marked the clearing's edge, the only gravel around. My eyes adjusted to the moonlight filtering through branches, and I sat up, listening intently. The crunching grew closer until I knew whatever was making the noise had reached the clearing's border. Then I saw it. This wasn't a person, and it didn't move like one. A faint white glow, barely brighter than a dying flashlight, slid along the tree line. It wasn't shining on the trees, but moving within them, weaving behind trunks while remaining visible. No footsteps, no snapping twigs, just that steady, shifting light. My mouth went dry. I remained motionless, watching it drift about 30 feet away, tracing the clearing's edge like it was circling. This wasn't a swinging lantern or swaying flashlight beam. It floated sideways, low to the ground, as if following an invisible rail. Instinctively, my hand found the tent's zipper. If someone was playing around, I needed to see more or maybe yell to scare them off. I eased the zipper down slowly, the tiny metallic sound feeling thunderous in the silence. When I finally opened the flap enough to peek out, the glow had vanished. No sound, no movement. Just the clearing, dark trees, and cold air on my face. I scanned the tree line for a minute, hearing nothing, not even typical nighttime sounds. No crickets, no rustling leaves. Complete silence. Half an hour passed before I grabbed my flashlight. Its beam cut across the clearing, illuminating everything exactly as I'd left it. Pale stones, fire pit, low grass. I swept the light toward where I'd seen the glow, finding only tree trunks and shadows. Walking to the edge, I searched the ground. No footprints, no trace. I was camping in a quiet clearing when something strange happened. Everything looked normal at first, but then I noticed my backpack had moved. I'd left it under the tent's vestibule before going to bed, and now it sat upright in the middle of the clearing. When I checked it, nothing was out of place. All my stuff was there, just relocated. The night became tense after that. I sat in my tent, flashlight in my lap, watching and waiting until dawn slowly brightened the sky. When morning came, the clearing appeared untouched. No footprints marred the dirt, the gravel ring remained undisturbed. My backpack was the only evidence anything unusual had occurred. I packed up quickly and left, cutting my trip short without looking back as I reached the trail. This wasn't the only odd experience I'd had recently. Late one night, driving home from a friend's place in Green Hollow, one of those tiny towns barely visible on a map, I encountered something peculiar. The roads were empty, stretching narrow between thick tree lines with occasional open fields breaking the darkness. Around 1 o'clock in the morning, a bright yellowish light caught my eye. At first, I mistook it for a street lamp, but there were no structures around, no poles, nothing to explain its presence. I slowed down instinctively and pulled onto the gravel shoulder. The light hung motionless about 200 yards off the road, suspended in a way that defied explanation. Too high to be a tractor light, too low to be a star. I killed the engine and rolled down the window. Only crickets and rustling grass broke the silence. Then it moved, not like anything I'd seen before. The light glided smoothly sideways, as if someone had effortlessly slid an entire scene along an invisible track. No bouncing, no tilting, just an unnatural, perfectly level motion that felt fundamentally wrong. Its movement was so steady, so detached from gravity, that it made my skin crawl. The hill was just a gentle rise, maybe 10 feet higher than the field, with nothing behind it but more land sloping down toward the woods. No sign of anything that could have hung a light out there. I stood by the side of the road for a while, trying to make sense of what I'd seen the night before. Earlier, I'd been driving home after leaving my friend's place around 12:45. The light I'd seen was unlike anything I'd encountered before. Steady and warm, moving across the side of the field. It didn't dim or flicker, just maintained its glow until it slipped behind the hill and vanished completely. I waited, expecting it to reappear on the other side, but nothing happened. Sitting there with my headlights off, I tried to understand what I'd witnessed. My eyes seemed to play tricks, suggesting faint movements in the darkness beyond the hill, but nothing concrete materialized. When I started the car again, something struck me. There were no utility poles or wires anywhere near that field. The road was empty in both directions, and I knew no power lines ran across that stretch. The radio was just static. I spun the dial, finding only dead air or a faint hiss. The AM station I'd been listening to earlier had disappeared. About 5 minutes later, another light appeared, this time lower to the ground. I initially thought it might be a car from a side road, but it turned out to be a farmhouse porch light far in the distance. Steady and fixed, it brought an unexpected sense of relief. Pulling into my driveway, I noticed something odd about the time. The trip typically takes 30 minutes, and I should have arrived just after 1:15. Instead, the clock read 1:42. I tried rationalizing that I might have sat in the car longer than remembered, but something didn't feel right. Inside, I made tea and checked the kitchen radio. It worked perfectly, with clear stations and late-night chatter. I considered sharing my experience, but hesitated. A floating street lamp sliding into a hill sounded absurd, like something fabricated. The next day, I drove back in daylight. The field looked completely ordinary. Patchy grass, no structures, no tire tracks. Nothing that could explain the mysterious light I'd seen. My name's Aaron, and I live in a narrow lot house on the town's edge, backing onto a strip of scrub and a small river where people fish during summer. Most nights, it's quiet. This night was different. The curtains glowed with a steady, pale wash, not like a street light or a neighbor's porch. It moved across the wall as if someone had left a flashlight pressed against the fabric. When I sat up, my phone read 2:17 a.m. Everything in the house was exactly as always. Shoes by the door, coffee tin in the kitchen, fan on timer in the hallway. I knew I wasn't dreaming. The radio hadn't come on. No mechanical sounds ticked, just that light through the curtains, pulsing like a heartbeat visible through a shirt. I first told myself it was the moon, but the moon was elsewhere, and moons don't blink. Pulling on pants and a sweatshirt over bare feet, I went to the back door and opened it. Rain-scented air surrounded me, despite the clear forecast. Cool grass pressed against my feet. Directly ahead, above the river's tree line, the light filled the yard and sky, blocking out every star in that patch. The white was wrong, neither warm nor cold, like a photo flash left on and dimmed. Absolutely silent. No hum, no mechanical whine, no distant motor. The air felt unchanged. Trees remained motionless. My neighbor's dog stayed quiet. An animal by the river, an owl or raccoon, started calling, then suddenly stopped, as if the world had been muted. I stood on the patio watching it pulse, once, twice, 3 times. My mind raced through rational explanations: a construction floodlight, someone with a generator on the far bank, a police helicopter. None fit. I could see neighboring houses. Every window was dark. No beams, no moving searchlights, no reflective surfaces in the trees. It wasn't close enough to smell, but not far enough to feel removed. Just a little too close. When something doesn't make sense, small details start to pile up. I'd been noticing odd electrical hiccups and strange noises over the past few days, never quite connecting them. The neighborhood Facebook group had a post about a mysterious humming on the south side. Heard around 11 p.m. My truck's clock was off by 3 minutes this morning, which I'd blamed on the battery I recently changed, and now the motion sensor on the garage hadn't clicked any lights when I came home. Standing there in the backyard, I realized these small incidents might be related. Who do you call about a strange light? I almost dialed the non-emergency police number but felt stupid. My sensible side wanted to go back inside, lock the door, and wait for morning. But something else pulled me forward. 3 steps into the damp grass, the world suddenly felt different, larger. The yard seemed to have deeper edges than usual. The light pulsed and leaned, not dimming but narrowing at its center. I kept walking, almost without intention. Then something, maybe a shift in how my ears perceive distance, made me stop. In that motionless moment, the light blinked twice, faster than before. And then, just like putting a thumb over a flashlight, it vanished. Completely. Immediately. No fade, no descent. 1 heartbeat, it filled the yard. The next, it was gone. Stars reappeared where it had been, trees returning to their dark silhouettes. Suburbia's textured quiet returned. The hallway fanned. Muffled heating sounds from nearby houses. Animal sounds crept back, first tentative, then whole. My neighbor's dog began barking at something on the street. I stood there, staring at the spot where the light had been, willing it to reappear. My phone read 2:24 a.m., 7 minutes lost. I know how that sounds. When you're certain you've been awake, a missing chunk of time feels like falling. I checked again. Still 2:24. The porch camera, an old doorbell setup I installed after package thefts, sat dark and silent, its LED unlit. I haven't bothered to link the cameras lately. I transferred the footage from the camera to my laptop and deleted the card, but something was off. When I opened the app, the camera had power, the ring around it blinked, yet the recorded clip was corrupted. A single 1-second file opened into a white frame and then nothing. Every other clip played normally. I walked the yard methodically, checking the fence line, riverbank, path, and tree trunks. The grass where I had stepped felt ordinary. No scorch marks, no footprints, no ozone smell. The air tasted like typical yard air, but my hands shook in a way unrelated to temperature. Back inside, I closed and locked the door, sitting at the kitchen table with the light off and blinds cracked open to watch the backyard. I stared until my eyes wanted to cross. Nothing returned. Around 3:10 a.m., I finally went to bed, but sleep was restless. Every creak seemed to carry a pressure, as if something might be moving just outside my field of vision. The next morning, I shared the story with my neighbor Casey while watering the lawn. He laughed initially, but frowned when I detailed the doorbell cam's appearance and timing. "Weird," he said. My dad mentioned seeing a bright object over the river from his porch, initially thinking it was a drone. When I asked about sounds at 2 a.m., he rubbed his eyebrow, recalling a muffled noise before falling back asleep. He checked his security footage, showing me a clip with a 2-minute timestamp gap around 2:17 a.m. By noon, 3 unexplained pieces of evidence had emerged. My door camera's corrupted file, Casey's system blank spot, and 7 missing minutes on my phone's clock. Proof of nothing, yet something odd had occurred. I continued my day work emails, dry cleaning pickup, dinner with a friend, discussing politics instead of skylights. But in quiet moments, the yard pulled at me. I kept visualizing how the light had narrowed before extinguishing, as if someone had focused and then switched it off. At dusk, I returned to the riverbank, surveying the backyards in one continuous view. No burned patch marked the far bank. The landscape remained unchanged, yet something lingered, an unshakable sense that the ordinary had been momentarily interrupted. My name is Ben, and I live in a small split-level house at the end of a cul-de-sac, tucked away from the marsh that borders the town. These nights are usually quiet, with only frogs and distant highway trucks breaking the silence. But this night was different. Earlier that day, I'd noticed small, odd things. The kitchen clock had stopped at 1:47, and I hadn't bothered to change the battery. My old radio had been acting strange all week, bursting with static during serious moments before snapping back to normal. I hadn't connected these details until the light appeared. I woke up because the curtains were unnaturally bright. This wasn't the soft glow of a street lamp, but a steady pale light that washed the entire bedroom as if someone was holding a flashlight behind a white sheet. Checking my phone out of habit, I saw it was 2:11 a.m. I tried to find rational explanations. A car with high beams, a neighbor's porch light, a late-night delivery truck, but nothing matched how this light filled the room without casting harsh shadows. Pulling on sweatpants and a t-shirt, I walked barefoot to the back door. The air smelled of wet marsh, green and heavy. The light hovered directly above the high cedar at the yard's edge, transforming the trees into flat, paper-like silhouettes. Where it hung, the stars disappeared, erased from the night sky. No sound accompanied it, no hum, no motor, no prop. Water continued to flow. Fireflies drifted like disconnected stars. I have no explanation, no authority to turn to. I've got cameras, a neighbor's testimony, and a pocket of lost time stitched into the night that I carry like a foreign object. When I tell people, they ask if I'm okay, offer coffee, and quickly change the subject. They want me to be normal again, to laugh it off. Sometimes I do. Other times, I stand at the back door, watching the sky, waiting. If something returns, I want to see how ordinary the world looks when it arrives. I stood on the concrete step, gripping the door frame with both hands, trying to make sense of what was happening. The smoke detector in the hallway chirped, softly, its battery low. A distant dog bark from Mrs. Lopez's house, cut off abruptly, as if silenced mid-sound. Outside on the lawn, the grass was cold and slick beneath my bare feet. My options felt limited. Call 911, drive into town, wait inside, or go out where the light was. It wasn't a brave choice, just the path that made sense. A pulsing light caught my attention. Not a sharp strobe, but a slow, rhythmic glow like a phone screen being checked at the edge of perception. My old analog watch seemed to hesitate, taking an extra second to tick. The light's precision struck me as mechanical, almost mathematical, before I realized how irrational that thought was. Halfway across the yard, a cedar tree's shadow fell across my boots. The light narrowed momentarily, as if focused through a lens, then expanded again. With each step, the pulse quickened subtly. Then, suddenly, it vanished. No gradual fade, no movement, just an instant transition from white sky to a normal, star-filled black. The subsequent silence wasn't true. Silence, but a restoration of ordinary sounds, a distant highway hum, an owl's cautious call, a neighbor's screen door creaking. My watch read 217. My phone, left on the kitchen counter, showed 219 when I later checked. Something felt odd, as if a few minutes had shifted imperceptibly while I wasn't paying attention. Back in the kitchen's bright light, I tried to act normal. I peeled an orange, its skin sliding off in one long strip, listening to the house's subtle sounds. The living room radio was dead, nothing but plain black static across all stations. The doorbell camera app showed only the moonlit sidewalk and marsh path, offering no explanation for what I'd just experienced. I walked the yard at dawn with a flashlight, searching for any sign of what had happened the night before. The ground was firm, dew flattened under my footprints as if nothing unusual had occurred. I'd spent the night in fitful sleep, the house sounds seeming to rehearse some unknown performance, pipes, furnace, and wind creating an unsettling symphony. Earlier, I'd scrolled through security camera recordings and found something strange. One long, unbroken block of footage from frames 1 through 209, then a single white frame at 210, and nothing else until normal footage resumed at 220. That white frame burned into my eyes, a washed-out image with no shape or detail, as if the camera sensor had been blinded. I called my brother, needing not to be alone with this small impossibility. He answered sleepy and grumpy, initially laughing and suggesting it might be a police helicopter. But when I described the pulsing light that vanished when I stepped into the yard, his tone changed. His wife joined the conversation, asking about house cameras and whether everything was locked. The neighbors added their own fragments to the puzzle. Mrs. Lopez mentioned hearing a strange whistle around 2, thinking it was a train. Down at the marsh path, couple walking their terrier recalled a bright flash over the cedar, which they'd assumed was a falling star during the meteor shower. Each explanation seemed plausible alone, but none fully accounted for all the details. The cancelled recording, the dead radio, the eerie moment when every creature seemed to pause and hold its breath. Throughout the day I tried to maintain normalcy, sending work emails, keeping a long postponed dentist appointment, but the feeling of being watched lingered. The hair on my neck perpetually raised, the thing felt smaller when dismissed and larger when acknowledged. And despite all the rational explanations, something remained unexplained, hanging in the space where that mysterious light had been. Night kept threatening to fold back over me. I stayed away from the backyard until dusk, sensing some unspoken rule about approaching a place where something strange had occurred. Tom from the hardware store dropped by, the kind of neighbor who believes nothing can rattle him. He clapped my shoulder and muttered those words people say when they're out of meaningful comfort. Don't let it get to you. As the sky deepened and creek frogs resumed their evening chorus, I stood by the kitchen window, staring at the cedar. Stars hung perfectly normal, pin-sharp against the darkness. No single narrative seemed definitive. A dozen people might witness the same thing and describe it a dozen different ways, or not describe it at all. The camera's white frame haunted me. Time had felt compressed, folded in on itself. Light had vanished the moment I stepped into its domain, as if I'd crossed an invisible boundary I wasn't meant to breach. That night I slept in my own bed with curtains drawn tight. The house hummed with familiar sounds, pipes, fan, the refrigerator's low pulse. Yet everything carried a faint marsh-after-rain scent. Around 1 a.m., curtain movement startled me. My heart raced until I realized it was just the cat perched on the windowsill, watching something outside. I didn't disturb the curtain, just listened. The night balanced between ordinary and extraordinary. I have no name for what I saw. No trusted photograph, no authoritative voice to validate my experience. Just a memory. A pale, steady light with a slow, hypnotic pulse. A blank white file. An unsettling sense that some quiet moments dissolve when you enter them. Life continues. I sleep. I work. I make coffee, and sometimes unbidden, my mind tries to grasp the light's shape, but it always slips away, undefined. On that night flight to Farmington, everything seemed routine. Clear sky, a thin moon slice hanging overhead. Autopilot engaged at 55500. A half-empty thermos chilled in the console. Radios murmured softly, occasional flight handoffs, a distant cargo truck's transmission echoing from what seemed like 3 counties away. Just another leg I'd flown countless times before. Something suddenly appeared in the landing light's cone, and I almost missed it, because at first it looked like just another star. But it wasn't. This object was far too close, positioned about 5 or 6 miles to the left, roughly at the same altitude as our wingtip. No blinking lights, no navigation signals, just a dark, solid shape against the night sky. The kind of silhouette that seems to absorb starlight completely. Initially, I tried explaining it away. Maybe an unexpected... I checked the transponder, switched to ident-air, and listened for any traffic advisories. Nothing. The electronic flight instruments remained blank, where traffic data should appear. My transponder was transmitting correctly, and the ADS-B was showing earlier traffic signals. Everything seemed functional, yet this object maintained its position relative to us like it belonged in our airspace. I radioed the center. Cessna 7KQH visual traffic left 2 o'clock, Same altitude, same intentions. The response came back crisp and professional. 7kh center. Roger. We show no primary or secondary target in your area. Maintain present heading and altitude. I acknowledged the message and double-checked our head. When I looked out the window again, the object had precisely matched our ground track and speed. Not in the way two planes might briefly fly side by side, but as if magnetically attached to our flight path. Disengaging the autopilot, I banked left 3 degrees for a better view. Then the object did something indescribable. It rolled, not turned or banked, but rotated as if gravity had loosened its grip. With a fluid, almost liquid motion, it slid laterally opposite my bank. No acceleration, no exhaust, no wake, it simply moved. We might have been dance partners, and it was effortlessly adjusting our choreography. I radioed center again, my voice more controlled than my racing thoughts. Center 7kh. The traffic is holding exactly parallel and rolling west. Static crackled in response. Radio crackled. My headset picked up that small, precise noise signaling something wasn't right. I flipped channels, checked the squelch, confirmed everything on the ground frequency. The systems were behaving normally. PTO heat on, vacuum steady, alternator green, clock blinking, then resuming its rhythm. Routine instruments doing routine things. And outside, something extraordinary doing nothing. I reached for the binoculars under the glare shield, cold and damp, like they'd been somewhere chilly before my hand touched them. Lifting them, I caught a shape, vague yet geometric. Unlike most aircraft's rounded bellies, the edges appeared matte, completely unreflective against the landing light. No windows, no tails, no prop blur. At these scales, I'd expect something to flicker or shimmer. Instead, nothing. It simply existed, matching our movements. When I turned for a head-on view, it did something unexpected. I banked right, nudging throttles to maintain steady airspeed. The object didn't chase in a straight line. Instead, it slid away as if tethered by an invisible string, someone gently releasing its hold. The roll completed like a lazy turn. Then it drifted sideways down the horizon, with no noise, no thermal wake, dispersing like a whirl of smoke in reverse. I called approach on the guard channel. Tail number reported, traffic visually spotted at 1 o'clock, matching altitude and gliding parallel. 7kqh, can you verify any aircraft in OMA sector? Quick response, negative. No targets on primary. We're showing your transponder and known traffic, but nothing else. So I asked the critical question, can you physically show me primary? Can you see anything on radar corresponding to what I'm looking at right now? A midnight flight turned strange when something caught my eye against the lower sky. An indigo silhouette appeared, and for 2 minutes, I watched it transform. It narrowed and brightened like a lens bending light, and I half expected it to ignite or strobe. Instead, it simply tightened into a point and vanished. No transition, no spray, no mechanism I could explain, just gone. Like someone had lifted a bird cage, leaving nothing behind. No streak across the stars, no trace. Suddenly, everything in the cockpit felt different. My cheap pilot's watch jumped 5 minutes and then corrected itself. The thermos slid inexplicably across the console. When I returned to neutral trim, my phone revealed something odd. One file corrupted into an unopenable blob, the other showing only 3 frames of a dark smear before descending into unsupported blackness. I reported this to the controller, who didn't press for details. They simply asked if I wanted to divert. I didn't. What would be the point? We continued toward Farmington like a ship passing through an insignificant fog. My hands hovered above the yoke, not quite touching it, as if that might offer some protection. The landing was routine, exactly what our instruments prepare us for. On the ground, I taxied slowly, leaving the lights on because the cabin retained an inexplicable electric coolness. At the FBO, I filled out paperwork and tried to get someone interested in my files. Maintenance checked everything, transponder traces, ATC printouts, GPS logs. They found nothing unusual, save a half-second ground speed blip on the GPS track. The controllers sent over the radar tape. It was clean where we'd been. This sort of thing happens sometimes at night, one of them said, as if that explained anything. I didn't expect answers. I didn't think there would be a report. I just flew. I was standing in the backyard, beer in hand, when the evening settled into that peculiar stillness. The sprinklers had just finished, the kids were inside, and a warm quiet draped over everything. That's when I saw it. A bright point hovering above the neighbor's garage roofline. At first, I thought it was a plane. This stretch of sky often has light trails, but something was different. This object descended slowly, like someone carefully lowering a paper lantern. It stopped just above the western horizon, hanging steady and unnaturally bright. Not a flare, not a streetlight. This was something else. It had that hard, focused quality of a star, thin and sharp. Strangely, it cast a small shadow on the maple lawn, a detail that felt fundamentally wrong. I realized I'd stopped breathing, caught in a moment where the geometry of reality seemed to shift. Little oddities began to stack up. The porch light flickered twice, as if someone was idly checking the switch. Gus, our dog, who normally chases bulls through thunderstorms, sat motionless on the back step, head tilted and listening. The crickets had gone silent. The entire neighborhood felt suspended, leaning in. A snippet of TV dialogue drifted through an open window, a jarring human sound in the absolute hush. I considered calling Lena from the kitchen, but something held me back. Later, when I returned home, I filed routine incident notes, careful not to worry my wife. People always want to categorize such experiences: weather balloon, drone, optical illusion, but nothing fit what I'd seen. Now I checked everything twice. The transponder, the squitter, the frequency, wing flex, even the thermos under the glare shield. I still fly at night. It's my job after all. But when something dark sits where a star used to be during the leg to Farmington, I call it in a little sooner. The controller always says nothing is showing. They always do. We stood together, watching the light in silence. My sister Lena was beside me, her feet soft in slippers on the back porch wood. The strange point hung motionless, impossible and slow against the night sky. Something about it felt casual, yet deeply strange. My phone felt heavy in my hand. I tried to unlock it, my thumb fumbling across the screen. When it finally lit up, the camera app opened to a grainy, smudged view. The bright point appeared as an overexposed smear, nothing like what my eyes were seeing. I switched to video, feeling the device warm unnaturally in my grip. I recorded for what seemed like minutes, 10 seconds, then 20. When I played back the footage, something was wrong. The file stuttered and dragged, as if someone had deliberately slowed the tape. The final frame dissolved into blackness. The audio remained clear, Lena's socks shuffling, the distant hum of a neighbor's refrigerator, but the light itself was just a blank white space. My watch began acting strangely. It blinked through impossible times, 9:07, then 9:21, then back to 9:08, as if trying on different moments. Lena noticed and laughed, a small sound that seemed to float uncertainly in the air. Her laugh felt like an attempt to untwist the growing weirdness. The light paused, deliberate as a hand hovering over a chess piece. Then it moved, not down, not away, but straight up, like something had pulled it with a slingshot. It accelerated in a way that made my stomach drop, racing from just below the roofline to impossibly high in a single blink. For a moment, it looked like a child's drawing of a comet, a sharp head with the suggestion of a tail. Then the tail vanished, leaving only a pin-sharp point of light racing into the darkness. Gone. We both spoke at once, words tumbling out that made no sense. Did you see? Where did it go? Neighbors' curtains shuffled as people leaned out of windows. Gus, our dog, shot up startled, then stood staring at the empty sky as if expecting the light to reappear. The maple shadow returned to normal. Just the soft, broad shadow cast by moonlight. The backyard felt strange after the light vanished. A weird silence hung in the air. I stood with Lena, our phones casting weak beams, trying to make sense of what we'd just seen. The signal had cut abruptly, like something was listening before going quiet. Small oddities began to surface. The sprinkler I'd turned off at 8 had somehow been cycling when we returned just minutes later. Its timer showed off, but that didn't match what we'd witnessed. Where the light had hung, a patch of lawn felt unnaturally cold, like stepping on stone chilled by ice. I knelt down, running fingers through the grass. No scorch marks, no singed stems, just damp, cool soil, with an earthy smell mixed with the mechanical tang of the nearby grill. We walked the yard's edge, calling out to Jonah and Mira. Jonah appeared over the fence in his robe and sneakers, looking slightly embarrassed. I thought it might have been an airplane or a drone or something on a fishing pole, he said, trailing off. Nobody had a solid explanation. Mira watched from her window, seemingly more concerned about the time than the strange event. Her cat perched on the windowsill, eyes gleaming like coins, before slipping through its door. Rational explanations started to crumble. Typically, backyards offer straightforward answers: neighbors, radio towers, satellites, pranks. I mentally checked off each possibility. No drones hovering at 9:30 on a Tuesday. No emergency calls on the scanner. The airport wasn't in that direction. Satellites don't dive toward the horizon and shoot straight up. Yet something had moved with an impossible precision where no known object should exist. We sat on the porch steps, staring at our phone screens as if they might reveal something. Lena suggested it could have been a meteor. I mentioned the comet visible last month. Our brains desperately seeking patterns. I kept thinking about that impossible shadow cast by the maple, and how unnervingly calm everything else remained. The sky returned to normal. Stars in their expected places. A thin haze over western trees. The moon a dry, distant coin. Inside, Gus followed us but stopped at the kitchen door, refusing to come any further. He watched the window, ears tilted forward, blinking slowly like someone emerging from a dream. I secured the back door, as if this simple action could anchor the night in place. Lena methodically rinsed dishes, turning off the water with deliberate movements. Meanwhile, I replayed the video repeatedly, watching my phone's battery drain from 90% to 80%. The file stuttered, skipping the bright section before freezing entirely. Suddenly, the screen flashed blue and settled on an unfamiliar face. My thumb hovered over the delete key, then went limp. I couldn't tell Lena anything more meaningful than it moved wrong, and that was the most honest description I could muster. Later, I fell asleep with the window slightly open, letting in the night's ambient sounds. A distant highway hummed. A dog barked 2 streets away, and a passing car turned its headlights away from our house. In the darkness, the memory of that sharp point of light descending low and then being pulled straight up felt like a subtle annotation to the ordinary. This didn't make me fear for the house's safety. Instead, it made me feel small and observed in a way that reminded me of a stranger's knowing glance in a grocery store. Morning revealed no traces of the previous night. The maple stood unchanged. Jonah hammered in his garage as usual, and the sprinkler timer ran its regular cycle. Gus wanted breakfast and ignored the window. I shared no details that might suggest anything supernatural, sticking instead to concrete facts. The time, the camera's malfunction, the cold patch of grass. Lena mused, maybe it was nothing. She wanted it to be nothing, yet a part of her remained vigilant, scanning the western sky at twilight, watching for a precise starlight point to descend and then vanish upward as if pulled by an invisible string. I drove into the mist without much contemplation. From 100 yards away, you could see it hanging low over the fields, like a cotton sheet draped across the road. This wasn't a typical highway fog that obscures headlights. This mist glowed from within, casting a pale, uniform light that made the wet guardrail shimmer like moonlight. The moment my car entered the mist, the radio dissolved into static. The highway stretched empty before me, silence wrapping around everything like a thick blanket. I'd stayed late at the shop organizing cabinets, promising myself I'd still make Sunday breakfast. A soft blue diner sign and an idling truck marked the distant exit. Mist hung low, compressing the world into something small and contained. The radio static filled the dash. Unchanging no matter which station I selected, something felt off, but not threatening. Mileposts seemed to skip unnaturally. 34, then 38, then 43. The digital clock flickered 207 twice in quick succession. A pickup ahead gradually vanished from view, its tail lights disappearing like extinguished Christmas decorations. An underlying hum vibrated through the car, constant and muted. Was it coming from the vehicle, or the atmosphere itself? My ears popped briefly, and I blinked to clear my vision. The mist carried a metallic scent, reminiscent of wet pavement after rain, except no rain had fallen. It swept through the cabin, leaving the upholstery oddly sterile. Where the road's painted lines met the fog, colors bled and merged as if the paint were melting into the air. Strangely, I wasn't frightened. Instead, a peculiar animal calm settled over me, an instinctive stillness that felt both foreign and natural. The fog held me with a soft, inexplicable grip that made turning back seem impossible. Driving late at night, the road stretched empty before me. Miles of darkness surrounded the car, with only a diner sign and a lone farm lamp breaking the blackness. My hands gripped the wheel tightly, keeping the car steady, maintaining speed, staying focused. Something felt off. 7 minutes had vanished without a trace. My cheap high school watch read 214, but the car clock showed 2142, a tiny discrepancy that gnawed at me. I ran through the route in my mind, the town line sign, the diner, the mists, the static. Nothing explained the missing time. I'd noticed strange things before, a porch light that wouldn't burn out, a store sign stuck on the same text for hours, but this felt different. My hands were sticky inside my gloves. The air tasted clean, ordinary, yet something was wrong. No memory of braking, No recollection of turning, no evidence on the road of anything unusual. A heaviness settled in my jaw. Stale coffee and a metallic smell lingered. My phone showed no missed calls, no notifications, no time jumps. The GPS still tracked me on the straight path home, as if nothing had happened. I drove with the windows cracked, cold air feeling unnervingly real. At the stoplight near my street, a kid on a bike rode by, singing with headphones on. The true weight of the time drift hit me when I noticed his watch matched mine exactly. For a moment, I wanted to ask everyone around me if something had happened. Did I hit something? But I couldn't shake the sense that something was just off. In the end, I did what kept me grounded. I pulled into my drive, killed the engine, turned the key, pulled the handbrake, opened the door. The mundane act of returning home felt like my only anchor to reality. I stood in the doorway of the house, letting the cold seep into my skin until my nose felt numb. Early sunlight spread pale and disinterested over the trees, turning the frosty lawn into something like watered glass. I'd done my ritual to reset whatever felt unsettled. The car seemed untouched, oil in its place, tires firm, no new bumper scratches. My coffee cup remained upright in its holder. A few dark specks dotted the driver's side floor mat, possibly old, possibly new. The radio held its last station's memory, waiting. Days after that 7-minute blank, I'd driven the same stretch of road repeatedly. People do this after strange experiences, searching for where, for explanation. The farm lights unchanged. The diner exactly as before, a yellowed menu, a man sweeping the sidewalk. Mile markers stood where they always had. I meant to tell someone, call the shop, text my sister, but what would I say? A story about 7 missing minutes and an inner blow that defied explanation. No. Instead, I made coffee slowly. The kettle sang its familiar note. That stretch of time remained like a removed film strip. I could describe its edges, the mist, the static, a particular smell, but nothing would connect in the center. When replayed, we were meant to ignore the cut. Now driving home at night, occasional oddities persist. Sometimes a patch of my neighbor's field appears lit from below, that same soft, impossible light. I blink, and it returns to ordinary lawn and fence. Was it a truck's headlight? A momentary doze? Coincidence scaling up a mundane explanation? My watch glass bears a few scratches from last month's toolbox trip. The radio works fine on regular frequencies. Static arrives only in areas with poor reception. Yet beneath these normalcies, something remains, the memory of that hiss, that hum, the precise quiet beneath an inexplicable ceiling. I don't have a story with an ending. I have only the experience itself, and the knowledge that when I look down, my clock shows the same minute twice. The night hung quiet around me as I moved along the ridge. My usual routine of coffee and sleep seemed distant now. 7 minutes echoed in my mind like a suspended breath. First came the lights. Not a sound, just delicate pinpricks threading through forest fir ahead of the switchback. They moved with an impossible grace, like tiny lanterns shaken on an invisible string, dancing between tree trunks, dipping under branches, rising and weaving with an almost deliberate path. For a moment I considered hikers with LED markers. Then reality struck. I was completely alone. My headlamp dangled unused around my neck, unnecessary beneath the massive white moon casting deep shadows. The red LED on my pack blinked softly. Pine pitch and damp earth filled my lungs. My breath forming thin fog in the cold air. I froze. Not by conscious choice, but that instinctive pause you experience when wildlife appears unexpectedly. My skin sensed movement before my mind processed it. These lights behave differently, not human, but intentional. 3 clustered together, then a single light pausing, then 4 spinning like a fleeting thought. Their warmth resembled candlelight through frosted glass, softer than harsh electronic glare. Strangely, they cast no reflection on wet needles or glossy bark. Sometimes a light would seemingly pass through solid tree trunks. Emerging slightly displaced, I attempted rational explanations, swamp gas, willow wisps, those folkloric descriptions that sound absurd until witnessed. Earlier, I'd been hiking with Maya and Tom. They'd moved ahead, breaking away at the rocky trail section near the creek. My troublesome knee had slowed me down. We'd planned to reunite at the switchback, maybe share a quick meal. Now, stepping onto the trail's small bench, these inexplicable lights waited ahead, a sinuous line of impossible tiny suns. I kept walking. The dark had gone thin and very close. I crept forward, my curiosity pulling me, despite my better judgment. Something was different about the night. The crickets had thinned to nothing, and the usual forest sounds had vanished. No Maya's laugh, no Tom's footfall. My heartbeat rose to my throat, a loud and private sensation. A small sound clicked against the packed soil. My headlamp hung unused against my chest, a weight I couldn't bring myself to activate, making sound felt, final, definitive. I felt watched, but not by a person, more like how a room knows you're in it. A wider, more encompassing feeling. The lights moved ahead of me, just out of reach. They seemed curious and cautious, threading forward. Each time I thought I'd catch up, they would turn and slide away. A breeze shifted the pines on the left side, and somewhere below, a branch cracked a small, insignificant sound that didn't explain what I was witnessing. Suddenly, the lights reacted. Like animals sensing a small movement, they darted with a collective twitch. They rose not as light attached to a body, but as living points choosing their path through the air. They scattered between tree crowns, moving like a flock of sparrows, stacking and twisting. Then, as silent as paper on a breeze, they stopped. Suspended midair, about 50 feet above the trail, they hung in an arrangement I couldn't define. Some clustered tightly, like a child holding bunches of stars. Others spread out like notes on a sheet of music, motionless, unflickering. The moon washed through them, turning pine bark silver. Their glow was steady and honeyed, neither burning nor reflecting. My breath caught in my lungs, creating a fog that rolled out in a white puff. Almost unconsciously, my hand reached for my phone. Cold to the touch, the screen showed 11:42 with no notifications. The weird part wasn't how it started, but how unremarkable the details were. My compass app twisted lazily, pointing north in the wrong direction. The watch second hand trembled. Small, stupid things that only matter when your brain is searching for meaning. The lights began to go out gradually, not all at once, but like someone softly twisting bulbs, one after another. They blinked off with an almost casual rhythm like slow eyelids closing. When the third light disappeared, the silence deepened. I remember thinking how strange it was that the sky still looked normal, moon and stars unchanged, which made the things hanging between branches seem even more unnatural. They winked out one by one until only moonlight and quiet remained, with my own breathing the only sound. The ending felt so immediate and mundane that I felt briefly annoyed. Annoyance is good at replacing fear, feeling more solid and manageable. I called out, a small, stupid human sound. "Hey," I said, and the echo returned thinner than my voice. Standing there, my legs growing numb, I considered turning on my headlamp and walking back to camp. I could call Maya or Tom, but my hands felt heavy as lead. I convinced myself whatever had been there was gone, and that counted as some kind of closure. Walking to where the lights had been, I kicked at the soft pine needles with my boot's toe. Nothing remained. No scorch marks, no residue. Just damp leaves and a startled beetle scurrying away. At the creek clearing, Maya and Tom sat on an overturned log, their faces pale with concern. "We heard you call," Maya said. She'd been near the water, thinking I'd turned back. Tom's pack lay open, a map peeking out. They'd seen nothing. When I described what happened, they shrugged in that way people do when they want to stay reasonable. "Maybe fireflies," Tom suggested. It might have been simpler if they'd witnessed it too. Shared strangeness feels less threatening, but their explanation felt thin. We hiked back in a loose, silent line, the unexplained hanging between us like mist. Walking the trail was like any other night. Roots and stones beneath my feet marked a path as familiar as an old story. A place where once my boot had slipped, leaving a scraped palm as a memory. A distant dog's bark cracked through the silence like unexpected relief. Later, in my kitchen's pale light, I scrubbed my boots and thought about the lights hanging in the trees. I searched for explanations in every mundane thing, reflections, pranksters, atmosphere oddities, but nothing felt right. No evidence remained, no photograph, no burned bark. Trying to remember those lights was like catching a glimpse of a stranger's face in a crowded street. The outline lingered, but details blurred and faded. I made coffee, listening to the kettle's clicking notes, waiting to see if daylight would render the memory ordinary. It didn't. The memory sat like a small stone in my shoe. Not painful, just persistently present. 3 hours into my overnight lake shift, everything moved to a simple rhythm. Cold coffee in a thermos, a cheap headlamp clipped to my cap. The water lay flat under a clear sky, the kind of night where thinking was optional. A heron cut through the quiet, landing on a distant piling, its neck frozen perfectly still against the starlit backdrop. My float bumped twice, then went still. I set the hook out of habit, reeling in a line that looked unchanged. Small oddities began to accumulate. My old analog watch ticked slightly offbeat. The cabin light across the inlet blinked once, then stayed dark longer than seemed natural. The marsh frogs, usually a constant chorus, suddenly went silent, their noise thinning to a thread before stopping completely. This silence made every small sound enormous. The oar scraping against the hull, the soft clink of my lure. Something had shifted, though I couldn't say exactly what. I was out fishing, the coffee thermos giving me trouble. Brand new and the cap stuck tight. When I finally got it open, a thin steam arc rose and vanished like a ghost. Those small moments pile up, making me more aware of the darkness surrounding me. Like noticing a loose floorboard just before stepping on it. The night sky was clear, stars scattered across the black canvas. The water near my boat's bow reflected them perfectly, smooth as glass. At first I thought the odd reflection was just a trick of the ripples. Then something strange happened. A patch of brightness appeared on the water's surface, unlike any starlight. Not a shimmer or a boat's wake, but a perfectly straight-edged plane of light. It looked like a sheet of metal tilted just enough to catch the starlight differently. When I leaned forward, the glow slid left. When I looked right, it moved right, always opposite to my movement. This was the first real moment of panic. My float bobbed, in sync with my racing heartbeat. I stood up, my boots echoing on the boat's floor. My headlamp's LED cast a soft cone of light, but everything beyond remained pitch black. The reflection held its precise angle, a perfect rectangular light hanging on the water's surface. It should have reflected sky and trees, but instead showed an almost white plain, like an unmarked billboard seen from an impossible angle. Water doesn't naturally hold such a straight edge, unless something lurks beneath. Grabbing my cheap field binoculars, I lifted them to my eyes. Through the lenses, the water's mirror remained the same bright plane. Following instinct, I traced the inexplicable shape upward. Suddenly, the brightness tilted and broke apart. Against the starfield, a crisp, hard line emerged, a sharp corner suggesting something much larger. It wasn't a typical aircraft or cloud. No sound, no beam, no glare. Just a dark wedge sitting motionless against the stars for a brief moment. My binoculars trembled in my hands, witnessing something utterly impossible. On the water, a thin wedge hung in the sky like a piece of paper between two fingers, absolute, impossibly sharp. My binoculars burned against my eyes, creating a sensation like staring too long at the sun, where everything around the central point goes wrong. When I lowered them, the patch on the water had already slit, and the wedge smeared into nothing, much like a wet finger erasing chalk. The stars remained fixed in their expected positions. Frogs stayed silent. A heron that had been present moments before had vanished without a trace. Its wings folded as if it had never existed. Seconds stretched out, filled only by the slow drip of water from my oar and the boat's gentle rattle against the dock. I tried convincing myself it was a hallucination, exhaustion, optical illusion, a trick of reflection. Instinctively, I reached for my phone, doing what people always do, holding up a rectangle, hoping the camera would capture what memory might fail to preserve. The screen illuminated, the camera app opened, and the battery icon offered a small comfort. Holding the phone steady, I pressed the shutter. The image showed only stars. The white plane, the wedge gone. The photo presented an ordinary world, as if my eyes had fabricated the entire experience. A second attempt yielded the same result, the viewfinder registering only a clear, reasonable sky. When I swiped through the photo gallery, the preview thumbnail glitched for a microscopic moment like a skipped film frame, before snapping back to normal. Unsettled by this brief aberration, I started the motor. The small outboard engine thudded, pulling us toward the slip. The lake remained undisturbed, no wake, no hint of disturbance. I kept the throttle low, testing whether movement might resurrect or dispel the reflection. Nothing changed. Back on the ramp, dockboards hummed beneath my boots. As I tied the line and unstrapped gear, I felt strangely disconnected, like someone else wearing my clothes. The familiar road home wound through pine forests, a two-lane highway with a yellow center strip creating a tunnel of light. I drove slowly, headlamps cutting through the darkness, radio silent. A single phone buzz interrupted the quiet, a morning text from my sister, casually asking about potatoes for Sunday dinner. I slept badly that night, waking at odd hours, my hand reaching for the headlamp, as if light might make the edges in the dark behave. After a long drive down Old Mill Road, I pulled over on a stretch with no houses, just a ditch on either side and sparse orange street lamps, creating soft black spaces between them. The dash clock glowed as I leaned back, trying to let my mind settle. Something had happened earlier, a strange moment I couldn't quite explain. I didn't tell anyone about the hard corner I'd seen in the sky. You don't start with those kinds of stories. Instead, I mentioned the frog seemed odd that night, and my neighbor asked about the fishing. I said yes, leaving out everything about the bright plane that vanished between the stars. Now I go fishing sometimes, returning to that place like you might revisit a spot where you once got lost, wondering if the path remembers you. The lake remains quiet, ordinary. Stars sit where they're supposed to. Frogs sing again, but occasionally in the kitchen window's corner, I catch a straight line against the dark where no line should be. I look up quickly the way you do when you hear your name called from behind. Nothing is ever there. I have photos that don't show what I saw. A thermos with a cap that stuck for a stupid moment. Memories of a shape with an impossible edge. The heron's wing beat over the lake. Water holding a patch of light like a second sky. None of it fits neatly. The binoculars stay in their case now, next to an old watch, both making sense, yet neither explaining the rectangle of light that didn't belong to the stars. Sometimes I remember how ordinary everything was, until suddenly it wasn't. My eyes shifted. Humid air hung heavy, thick with cut grass and exhaust. Crickets hummed steadily, not loud but constant. Minutes passed. A distant blink caught my attention. A dim headlight rolling toward the intersection 2 miles away. Just another passing car, I thought. I watched it approach the lamppost near the mill. Then something strange happened. The light vanished abruptly, disappearing between poles before it should have. The silence changed. Crickets seemed to fold quieter. Jumpy nerves rising, I reached for the stereo, turning up the radio. Static hissed underneath. The digital display read 12:07. I noted the time, wanting to track how long I'd been sitting here. Time matters when you're trying to convince yourself you're not losing your mind. Every detail etched itself into memory. Lampposts, warm air, leather car interior. That's when the rearview mirror filled with light. Not a sweeping headlight beam, but a sudden white glow, like a tiny sun had replaced my mirror's reflection. A flat, clean white that consumed the entire rectangle, hanging there for a soft, strange second. Bright enough to repaint everything in pale tones. The glove compartment, steering wheel curve, tiny scratches near the gear shifter. I looked up through the back window. Nothing. Just black road, roadside ditch, a patch of cattails. No vehicle lights. No people. No shape explaining the mirror's sudden illumination. Slowly, almost stupidly, I turned in my seat. The angle revealed the road behind and part of the embankment. Absolutely nothing. No headlights. No flash. No source for the reflective glare. The street lamp cast a narrow orange cone across the pavement. Beyond that, only a black road ribbon stretching into darkness. Turning back, the mirror returned to normal. A dark rectangle showing an empty road slice. The dash clock now read 12:21. My heart skittered like a stone across water as I stared at the dash clock. 12:07 to 12:21. 14 minutes vanished in the space of a breath. Something wasn't right. I froze, hand hovering over the stereo knob, willing the numbers to explain themselves. A quick glance at my phone confirmed the same time pattern. 12:07. My watch read 12:08, which meant I hadn't even closed my eyes for a full minute. Only the dash clock had leapt forward, a solitary aberration in an otherwise still moment. I stepped out of the car onto the shoulder. Cold gravel crunched beneath my shoes. The night bit at the back of my throat. Almost mechanically, I walked to the trunk and opened it, checking that everything remained untouched. The gym bag and jumper were exactly where I'd left them. No mud, no strange prints, just my own. The road stretched out boringly normal. Streetlights hummed. The ditch swallowed darkness. Nothing glowed or pulsed that might explain why the mirror had momentarily felt like a window into something else. My heart raced, that jittery sensation suggesting I might need sugar, water, or possibly an ambulance. Seeking normalcy, I returned to the driver's seat and turned the engine over. It coughed to life on the third try, with a mechanical reluctance typical of an old car with a lazy battery. I drove, keeping centered in the lane as if I were the sole traveler. For the next 10 minutes, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting that strange white patch to reappear. But the mirror showed only the familiar, boring sweep of receding road. A tiny orange street lamp gradually shrank into darkness. The dashboard clock ticked forward normally. My phone's timestamp held steady. The radio played its mundane station, clear and uninterrupted. It felt as if some invisible string had been snapped, everything settling back into place. Yet 14 minutes remained unaccounted for. Missing from every device except the car. When I reached home, I checked everything twice. The thermostat stood undisturbed. The front porch light flickered on as I approached, offering its usual welcome. I hit the switch with its familiar throb. In the living room, my wife was folding laundry and asked if I wanted coffee. I said yes and lied about taking a longer smoke break by the car. A text went to a friend, some dumb line about being a tired wreck. When the world seems off, you look for small, tidy confirmations. The timestamps lined up, 128 on my phone and watch. My old analog watch sometimes hangs when I forget to wind it, but this time it matched the phone, not the dash. No explanation. I called the dealership later, asking if the dash could misbehave like that. Could it jump? The kid said probably a loose connection, maybe a software hiccup from an electrical spike. He asked about storms. I said no. When he mentioned spike, I thought about the white square in the mirror and the radio's hiss when a car seemed to blink out. Just get it checked, he said. Bring it in tomorrow. Sleep was bad. When I woke, those 14 minutes felt like stale coffee in my memory. I wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone, just to myself. Stories come in pieces, and sometimes those pieces refuse to connect. At the dealer, they hooked the car to a scanner, fiddled with the clock, shrugged at a possible loose wire. They tested the alternator, ran diagnostics on the display. Nothing showed except a tiny log entry for a time sync error that their tech couldn't explain. He looked at me and said, the one thing I didn't want to hear, mechanical issues would explain the feeling away. Electrical gremlins are usually just bad wiring. So I'm writing this with no answers. 14 minutes appeared on the dash like someone pressed fast forward and left the film broken. The mirror filled with a white square that vanished like a closing shutter. The only concrete thing, I'm home and the world kept going. The rest sits in that place where small, unaccountable things live beneath the ordinary. Here's my rewritten version. Lake Woodson isn't much, just a quiet spot in northern Wisconsin with trees, cabins, and dark water. My name's Tom Granger, and I know this place like the back of my hand. Night fishing is my thing, especially with Whiskey, my scruffy dog who loves hanging out on the dock. That September night started normal enough. Around 9:30 p.m., the air felt heavy, promising a storm. Stars filled the sky, and a light wind made the water shimmer. Whiskey sprawled at my feet while I settled in with my coffee, casting my line into the deepest part of the lake. An hour passed. Owls called in the distance. Fish splashed occasionally. Then something changed. About 30 feet from the dock, a strange glow caught my eye. Not bright, but definitely there. A pale greenish-white light just beneath the water's surface. Weird thing was, the water remained completely undisturbed. No ripples, no movement, just this soft, diffuse light hovering impossibly still. I leaned forward, trying to make sense of it. The light didn't flicker or shift. It was like a barely visible glow stick suspended underwater, except nothing was actually touching the surface. Something felt off. After that night, I started watching my surroundings differently. My phone stays face up on the passenger seat now. Sometimes at traffic lights, I catch myself checking the rearview mirror, half expecting something unexplainable to reappear, but it never does. The dashboard numbers remained stubbornly ordinary. My fishing rod was forgotten as I stared at something glowing near the shore. At first, I couldn't tell if it was bioluminescence or just a strange reflection. With my flashlight, I cut through the darkness, but the glow remained unchanged and motionless. Whiskey's ears twitched, locked on the same spot. Then the light began to rise. Slowly at first, just inches above the water's surface, then accelerating upward like an escaping bubble. But this was no ordinary bubble. It was smooth, round, and growing brighter with each passing moment. Beneath it, the water stayed perfectly flat, no ripples, no disturbance. I blinked and rubbed my eyes, half expecting the vision to vanish. Instead, it continued rising, reaching about 10 feet above the surface before drifting horizontally across the sky, moving away from the dock. Frantically, I grabbed my phone to capture the moment, but the screen immediately dimmed and went black. Multiple attempts yielded the same result, as if the device was deliberately refusing to record what I was seeing. Whiskey growled softly, his hackles raised. A chill ran through me despite the mild temperature. A glowing orb moved silently and steadily, tracing a slow arc across the starry sky like it was following an invisible route. My heart raced as I watched it drift, and then, without drama, it simply faded away, like a lamp being switched off. The entire encounter lasted only 2 or 3 minutes. Afterward, the lake remained eerily calm, with no evidence anything unusual had occurred. Sitting back on the dock, I struggled to comprehend what I'd witnessed. Whiskey stayed close, ears swiveling toward the lakeside trees, still tense. My phone remained black, and the thermos had gone cold. My hands trembled slightly. For the rest of the night, I scanned the sky, but nothing else appeared, just the usual sounds of crickets, wind, and distant water splashes. The next morning, I shared my experience with Greg, a fellow fisherman who knew the lake intimately. He didn't dismiss my story, simply remarking, "Sometimes the lake has its mysteries." I was out walking my dog, a mute named Pippa, on a trail behind our house in the outskirts of Asheville. Late afternoon and early fall, with crisp air and trees just starting to turn gold and red, the kind of colors that hint winter's close, but not quite. The trail is mostly quiet, except for birds and squirrels, and Pippa loves sniffing around fallen leaves. I'd left my phone in my pocket, wanting to enjoy the walk and clear my head after a long week at the bookstore. Pippa was more restless than usual, tugging a bit harder, so I let her off leash. The trail curves through a dense patch of trees, and that's when I saw it. About 50 feet ahead, above the treetops, a large object was hovering. No noise, no hum, no wind, nothing. Over the next few days, I tried to make sense of what I'd seen. I spoke with local folks about that night. Elsie, a woman from around here, mentioned seeing a faint light near the lake around the same time, though she thought it might be a flashlight or kids messing around. No one else reported anything similar. I searched for rational explanation. Biole algae doesn't occur in local freshwater lakes. Not a boat reflection. No boats were out. No fishing lights on the lake. No airplanes or helicopters nearby. What haunted me was how the water remained completely still, even as something rose from its surface and drifted away. The glow was bright and steady, but the lake showed no reaction. Since then, I've returned to the lake multiple times, sometimes with whiskey, sometimes alone. The night of the sighting, the air felt different, thicker, heavier. Other nights are just normal, calm, quiet. My phone works fine, no blackouts or dead screens. And Whiskey, my dog, has never liked the dock after dark since that night. He stays close to shore, avoiding looking over the water. I don't know what that light was. Honestly, I'm not sure I want to know. It didn't harm anyone, didn't speak or do anything specific. Just appeared, drifted across the sky, and vanished without a trace. At some times, when the wind is right and the lake is perfectly still, I swear I catch a faint glow just beneath the surface, waiting. The world tends to mess with your head after dark. The trail was quiet that day when I first spotted it, a massive object hovering silently, far larger than any drone I'd seen before. Its flat oval shape stretched about 10 feet across, with a dark, matte surface completely devoid of lights or markings. My heart raced as I stopped walking, staring in disbelief. When I reached for my phone to capture the moment, something strange happened. The screen instantly went black. No warning, no gradual shutdown, just dead. I tried everything. Pressing the power button, holding it down, connecting it to my portable charger. Nothing worked. Pippa stood beside me, calm and seemingly unbothered. Her relaxed demeanor provided some comfort as I tried to rationalize what I was seeing. Was this some experimental weather balloon or an advanced prototype drone? The object remained perfectly still, hanging in the air as if observing me. A strange sensation crawled across my skin, making me uneasy. After a few minutes, I decided to head back toward the trailhead. I kept glancing back, but the mysterious craft stayed exactly where it was, silent and motionless. At home that evening, I examined the phone more closely. No water damage, no cracks. It seemed perfectly fine, yet completely unresponsive. I left it charging overnight, hoping it might resurrect itself. The next morning, the phone remained lifeless. I called my tech-savvy friend Leah, who tried every possible method to revive it. Hard resets, software restores, computer diagnostics. Nothing worked. The device was completely dead. I spent hours searching online for any reports of unusual drone sightings near Asheville. No police reports, no local news, no forum discussions, nothing to explain what I'd witnessed. Then, unexpectedly, something bizarre occurred. While sitting on my couch, I watched the phone's screen suddenly flicker to life. It took a few minutes to fully boot, as if nothing had ever been wrong. The entire experience left me with more questions than answers. The trail was quiet that midweek morning in early fall, with trees just starting to change colors and the air crisp and slightly damp. I prefer hiking alone, no distractions, just me and the path. I'd walked for about an hour, nothing unusual, just leaves crunching and occasional bird calls. Then something strange happened. I started hearing a weird noise through my earbuds. It wasn't music or any recognizable language, more like static with an odd rhythm. The sound was faint at first, garbled and electronic, reminiscent of those sci-fi scenes where aliens try to communicate through a weak radio signal. I initially thought it might be someone nearby playing a prank or my earbuds malfunctioning, but my phone was zipped away in my backpack and completely powered off. In the days following that incident, things got even stranger. My phone seemed normal at first. All my apps, photos, and messages were exactly as I'd left them, but the timing felt off. Pippa, my dog, started acting unusually nervous around the trail. She would freeze, stare intensely at the trees, and emit a low growl I'd never heard before. Once, she even refused to step onto the trail. I returned to the area a few times, searching for any sign of the mysterious craft, but found nothing. Just normal forest sounds and no unusual lights or noises. Since then, my phone has developed random glitches. The camera app crashes when I open it, and the flashlight turns on by itself without explanation. Nothing serious, but enough to keep me unsettled. I can't explain what I experienced that day or why my phone died the way it did. I'm not even sure if what I encountered was from this world. All I know is that quiet afternoon doesn't make sense. Whatever was out there wasn't looking to be discovered. It was simply watching. I was hiking when something strange started happening with my earbuds. They were unplugged, just dangling in my hands and totally silent. But when I put them back in, a low noise came through, soft yet clear enough to make my skin crawl. At first I thought I was just tired or imagining things. I kept walking, but the sound persisted, rhythmic, like voices talking back and forth. These weren't human voices. Something else was communicating and it didn't make sense. I glanced behind me, expecting to see another hiker or someone messing around. The trail was empty, just trees and fading afternoon light. The more I listened, the more unsettled I became. The sounds weren't like any language I recognized, but they weren't random either. They felt deliberate, as if something was trying to communicate through my earbuds. The forest seemed to change. The air felt heavier, thicker. Without realizing it, I was holding my breath. Suddenly, the noises stopped. Something about the atmosphere shifted. It was too quiet. No birds, no rustling leaves, just silence. I turned slowly, scanning the trees and underbrush. Nothing was there. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, louder than before. I decided to remove the earbuds completely. The moment I did, the forest seemed to come back to life. Birds started calling. A light wind shook leaves from branches. I shook my head, trying to clear my thoughts and make sense of what had happened. Hiking back along the main trail, an uneasy feeling followed me. Something felt like it was watching, just beyond my perception. By the time I reached my car, darkness had fallen and parking lot lights flickered on. I checked my phone. No messages, no missed calls, no strange signals. I'm not someone who typically gets spooked, but that day was different. Something had been there, just beyond the edge of what I could perceive, attempting to make contact without fully revealing itself. I'm not sure I want to return to that trail alone again. For years, night sky photography had been my passion, capturing landscapes and celestial scenes around northern Maine. Photography was my world, but I never expected to document something I couldn't explain. One crisp October night in Eastport, I set up my camera in the side yard, pointed toward the sky beyond the tree line. The ocean fog had just receded, leaving a damp chill in the air. My goal was simple: capture the Milky Way, or maybe glimpse the northern lights. I programmed the camera to take photos every 10 seconds over 4 hours, planning to review the images the next morning. When I downloaded and started creating the time-lapse video, everything seemed normal at first. Stars moved slowly across the frame, clouds drifting occasionally. Then something caught my eye, an unusual shape in the middle of the image. Dark initially, it blended almost seamlessly with the night sky. But this wasn't a typical night sky object. The shape began rotating independently, hovering subtly. I first assumed it might be a drone or weather balloon. However, the object defied typical explanations. Its color began shifting from deep blue to an unsettling green, then to a dull orange. No stars or planets behaved like this. I rushed outside to verify what I'd seen, but the sky appeared completely ordinary, clear, unchanged. When I showed the footage to Lena, my wildlife biologist friend who understands technological equipment, she suggested it might be a camera artifact or light reflection. Her explanation seemed rational, but something nagged at me. The next night I repeated the exact same setup, driven by curiosity and a growing sense that something unexplained was happening right above my backyard. The nights had become a ritual of watching and waiting. Luna, my lean border collie mix with sharp eyes, would grow increasingly tense as darkness settled. Her ears would twitch, alert to something beyond my perception. Every evening, the strange shape would appear in the camera frame, rotating with an unsettling irregularity, sometimes near the horizon, other times almost directly overhead. Its colors cycled softly, pastel hues shifting from deep green to blue to a dull amber. The stars around it remained steady, moving predictably eastward, which made its erratic movement even more peculiar. I started investigating, checking local weather radar and flight paths for any possible explanation. Nothing matched the time or location of these appearances. Luna never relaxed during these encounters, always on edge, following me closely. One particular night, I decided to get a closer look. With binoculars and a second camera with a zoom lens, I sat in the yard as fog rolled off the nearby harbor. Around 11:45 p.m., the shape materialized. When I tried to focus, it appeared blurry, like looking through a heat haze or dirty glass. A faint pulsating glow seemed to breathe with an almost living quality. The object moved subtly, not jumping but drifting. The zoom camera captured strange distortions, with pixelation around its edges suggesting some form of interference. An unsettling sensation crept over me. I felt watched. After about 30 minutes, it slowly drifted upward and vanished. Street lamps buzzed softly and Luna whimpered. The next morning, reviewing the footage revealed something odd. The zoom lens camera was missing several minutes of recording. The air that night had smelled of salt and pine, and the distant hum of power lines or a passing plane mixed with an unexplained tension that Luna and I both seemed to feel. Black frames with static sound. The main time-lapse camera was fine. I kept replaying the footage, scanning for anything unusual. Nothing caught my eye, no person, drone or balloon. The shape defied explanation, casting no shadow on the clouds and reflecting no light I recognized. Some nights when the sky turned overcast, the shape vanished completely. Yet sometimes I sensed something nearby, an unsettling presence where the air seemed to thicken and a low vibration trembled through the ground. One cold, clear evening after a late diner shift, I stopped by the side yard to check the camera. Luna sat quietly beside me, her tail flicking. The battery pack felt warm, which struck me as odd since it wasn't charging. The shape appeared low on the horizon, rotating slower than before. This time, its surface rippled like water, not just cycling through colors. An unusual glow illuminated only the nearest pine trees. Moving closer and careful not to startle Luna, I watched intently. A small part of the shape flickered, becoming momentarily transparent, almost as if it wasn't fully present. I snapped a photo with my phone. When I checked the image, the sky was empty, the shape completely gone. A tight knot formed in my chest as I set the phone down. Strange dreams haunted my sleep that night. Fragmented images of light and color swirled through my mind, cold wind brushing my face while Luna barked at invisible shadows. Weird occurrences began accumulating. Streetlights would flicker when the shape appeared. My phone would randomly lose signal or restart. One night, I set up a motion sensor by the back door. Luna paced nervously inside. Around 2:30 a.m., the sensor detected a soft movement near the bushes. But when I looked outside, nothing was there. By morning, the motion sensor had died, its batteries completely drained. I reviewed the time-lapse footage from that night. The shape briefly appeared, but midway through the clip, the entire sky went black for 15 seconds before returning to normal. The stars remained frozen in place. I rubbed my eyes, staring in disbelief. No explanation made sense. My neighbors noticed nothing. No news reports emerged, just Luna and I, watching the sky, feeling the nights grow increasingly heavy with unspoken mystery. Luna's ears are always tense, pointing towards the horizon like she's waiting for something to return. I catch her watching, and I find myself doing the same, camera pointed upward, searching for something that might explain the strange footage. The slow rotation, the color shifts, the rippling, it all feels like a puzzle with missing pieces. Decades of working with radios had been more than just a job. After leaving the engineering firm, it became a way to keep my hands and mind active. My old Zenith, bought at a garage sale years ago, still carried the faint smell of cigarette smoke from its wooden frame. It started on a night like any other. 11:47 p.m., a time I always check reflexively. The AM station static filled the room, then suddenly 3 distinct tones cut through. Beep, just 3 sounds, then silence. Initially, I dismissed it as interference or a transmitter glitch, but then it happened again. The next night, exactly the same. 3 tones, precisely at 11:47 p.m. Coincidence seemed less likely. I started logging everything. Dates, weather, any potential context. The pattern remained rigid. No variations. No additional sounds. Just those 3 tones. The more I observed, the stranger it became. The tones would only emerge under specific conditions. The radio had to be on a particular frequency. The time had to be exactly 11:47 p.m. If I fell asleep early or late, I'd miss it. If I changed the station or turned the radio off, nothing happened. It felt like a clockwork message, sent from somewhere unknown, hitting its mark with precision once every 24 hours. And all I had were questions. Questions that hung in the air as silently as Luna's watchful gaze and the unexplained shapes in the sky. I'd been obsessed with those radio tones for months, testing every receiver I owned. My Zenith was the only one that picked them up clearly. I called the local AM station once, asking about the transmission, but the technician just laughed, dismissing it as interference or a prank. My family thought I was losing my mind. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, scribbling notes about mysterious beeps, but something felt deeply important about these signals that I couldn't quite explain. One night, after the tones finished, I waited. I hoped they might repeat or change, but only silence followed. Then, barely audible, a strange sound emerged. Not quite static, more like a soft hum or wind whispering through a distant tunnel. I strained to hear, but couldn't make out the details. The frequency remained constant. I started recording the transmissions with an old cassette recorder, capturing the precise moment of the tones. When I played back the recordings, the tones were crystal clear, but that faint whisper had vanished. It seemed to exist only in the live moment, impossible to capture. I tried mapping the signal, attempting to triangulate its origin, but found no discernible pattern. My house sat in a quiet neighborhood on the town's outskirts, with no known transmitters nearby except the local AM station and a few distant police radio towers. One evening I waited on the porch as the night grew still. At exactly 11:47 the 3 tones came through, sharp and steady. Then I saw it, a soft blue-green light flickering in the distance, hovering silently a couple of miles away. It wasn't a car, street lamp, or aircraft, just a steady glow that disappeared in an instant. I tried to rationalize it, maybe a plane or helicopter, but nothing flew over our neighborhood that late without making a sound. The light had been too precise, too deliberate to be a random occurrence. The old Zenith radio was my obsession. Built in 1953, it was a relic from another time, all tubes and dials. At first, I'd noticed the strange tones that came through at almost exactly 11:47 each night. My notes were meticulous, tracking every occurrence, but something started to change. One morning, I found my carefully logged notes scattered on the floor near the radio. I didn't remember knocking them over, but maybe I had sleepwalked. When I gathered them up, I noticed something unsettling. The times weren't always precisely 11:47 anymore. Some logs showed 11:46 or 11:48. This small discrepancy made me question everything. Was my memory playing tricks? Was my internal clock off? The radio remained tuned to the same frequency, the tones still coming through sharp and clear. Then the whispers began. At first, just faint murmurs after the tones, like a voice trying to form words but failing. I didn't dare record them, worried they might vanish if I tried. Over the weeks, the presence grew stronger. Sometimes when the tones played, I'd feel watched, as if distant eyes were tracking me through the static. One night I left the radio on all day, anticipating the 11:47 tones, but nothing came. The next night, I found the radio had mysteriously switched stations, static filling the speaker. When I reset it, the tones returned the following night. I started believing the radio was more than just a device. Maybe it was catching signals from somewhere beyond my understanding, or something was reaching out to me. There were no logical explanations, no discernible patterns. My friends laugh when I try to explain. Even my son thinks I'm wasting my time, but I keep listening. Every night, I wait for those 3 mysterious tones, wondering what they mean and where they come from. The night was quiet, almost too quiet. My drive home from the hospital in Spokane was like any other late-night shift. The clock nearing 2 a.m. early spring air crept through my slightly cracked windows, carrying a hint of lingering day warmth. The radio hummed softly, barely breaking the silence of the near-empty roads. Then something strange happened. About 20 minutes into my drive past the last streetlights where highway meets open fields, I saw a light in the sky. At first I thought it might be a falling star, but this was different. It wasn't streaking or rushing. It descended slowly, almost floating, completely silent. I blinked, wondering if city lights were playing tricks on my eyes. But no, the light hung there, maybe a few hundred feet above ground. It wasn't harsh like a spotlight, just a soft, steady amber glow. I slowed the car, trying to make out its shape, but it remained a bright blur. Then, without warning, it shot straight up. Faster than anything I'd ever seen, like a bullet, but again without a sound. Just vanished into the dark sky above the trees. My heart raced, not from fear exactly, but a strange mixture of confusion and tension. I checked my rearview mirror, half expecting to see someone else who might have witnessed this, but the road remained empty. When I got home, I told Sarah about it. She laughed it off, suggesting it was just a satellite or drone. But I know what I saw. Drones don't move like that. Not at that height, not that silently. And now, sitting here by my bedside, that watch telling me it's almost time again. I can't shake the memory. Nights passed, and I kept my eyes fixed on the sky while driving, scanning for any sign of that strange light again. But everything seemed ordinary. The stars twinkled just like always, and the sparse traffic continued its usual pattern. Something shifted after that night. Small, unsettling details began to accumulate. My phone started acting weird, calls dropping unexpectedly, the screen flickering randomly. The clock radio had a peculiar habit of resetting itself, always around 2 a.m. Even the lights in my apartment would dim momentarily, like a quick electrical hiccup, though the building's main power never actually failed. At first, I tried to dismiss these occurrences. I'm not someone who gets easily rattled. But the more I reflected on that mysterious light, the more unnerved I became. Its movement defied logic. That slow descent, the eerie hover, then the sudden, sharp climb upward. I checked tracking apps for any explanation. No nearby planes, no satellites that could account for what I'd seen. Maybe I was just exhausted, I thought, overworked after a long shift, possibly hallucinating from fatigue. Yet the memory remained vivid, refusing to fade or be rationalized away. Something about that night was different, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something extraordinary had happened. I apologize, but it seems like the original text you intended to share is incomplete. Could you provide the full text you'd like me to rewrite? Without the complete passage, I can't accurately restructure the paragraphs while maintaining the original meaning.